The enigma of our sleeping consciousness. Every night, as darkness descends and the world grows quiet, we surrender ourselves to one of nature's most mysterious processes. We close our eyes, relinquish our grip on conscious awareness, and drift into a realm where logic dissolves, time becomes fluid, and our minds embark on journeys we can barely remember upon waking. Sleep, this universal human experience that consumes roughly 1/3 of our lives, remains one of the most fascinating and least understood phenomena in psychology and neuroscience. For millennia, humans have been captivated by sleep. Ancient civilizations believed it was a time when the soul left the body to wander other realms. Philosophers from Aristotle to Descartes pondered whether sleep represented a kind of temporary death, a rehearsal for our final departure from consciousness. Even today, with all our sophisticated brain imaging technology and neurochemical understanding, sleep retains an aura of profound mystery. What exactly happens when we sleep? Why do we dream? How does our psychology transform in those dark hours? And most intriguingly, who are we when we're no longer awake? This exploration will take you deep into the psychological dimensions of sleep, far beyond the simple biological necessity of rest. We will examine sleep not merely as a physical state, but as a complex psychological landscape where memory consolidates, emotions process, creativity incubates, and the unconscious mind speaks in the symbolic language of dreams. We'll investigate how sleep shapes our identity, influences our mental health, and serves as a window into the deepest layers of human consciousness. Sleep is not simply the absence of wakefulness. It is an active, dynamic state where the brain engages in essential psychological work. During sleep, our minds sort through the day's experiences, filing away important memories while discarding trivial details. We process emotions that may have been too overwhelming to fully experience during waking hours. We problem solve in ways that our conscious minds cannot, making creative connections that seem impossible in daylight. We confront our fears, rehearse social interactions, and sometimes receive profound insights that change the course of our lives. The psychology of sleep intersects with virtually every aspect of human experience. It affects our mood, our relationships, our performance, our physical health, and our very sense of self. When sleep is disrupted, the consequences ripple through every dimension of our psychological functioning. Conversely, when we sleep well, we think more clearly, regulate our emotions more effectively, and engage with life more fully. In recent decades, modern society has waged a quiet war against sleep. We have electric lights that override our natural circadian rhythms, digital devices that stimulate our minds when they should be winding down, work cultures that valorize sleep deprivation as a badge of productivity, and a collective amnesia about the psychological importance of adequate rest. The consequences of this war are now becoming devastatingly clear in rising rates of anxiety, depression, cognitive decline, and a general sense of psychological malaise that pervades contemporary life. But there is also a countervailing movement, a growing recognition that sleep is not a luxury or a waste of time, but rather a fundamental pillar of psychological well-being. Researchers are uncovering sleep's crucial role in everything from emotional regulation to creativity, from trauma processing to spiritual experience. We are beginning to understand that the quality of our sleep directly determines the quality of our waking consciousness. This article will guide you through the multifaceted psychology of sleep across several key domains. We'll begin by exploring the architecture of sleep itself, the distinct stages and cycles that structure our nightly journey through unconsciousness. We'll then delve into the fascinating realm of dreams, examining what they reveal about our psychological depths. We'll investigate sleep's critical role in memory and learning, its profound influence on emotional processing and mental health, and surprising contributions to creativity and problem-solving. We'll also examine the darker side of sleep, the nightmares, sleep disorders, and insomnias that plague millions, not merely as medical conditions, but as meaningful psychological phenomena that carry important messages about our inner lives. We'll explore the developmental psychology of sleep, how our relationship with sleep changes across a lifespan, and what these changes reveal about human development. And we'll consider sleep from cultural, evolutionary, and even existential perspectives, asking what our need for sleep tells us about the fundamental nature of human consciousness. Throughout this exploration, we'll draw on cutting-edge research from neuroscience, depth psychology, cognitive science, and psychotherapy, weaving together scientific findings with clinical insights and lived experience. We'll hear from individuals whose lives have been transformed by understanding their sleep, and we'll examine practical approaches to cultivating a healthier relationship with this essential aspect of our existence. The goal is not simply to inform, but to transform your relationship with sleep, to help you see those hours of unconsciousness not as lost time, but as a vital psychological process that makes us more fully human. By the end of this journey, you may find yourself viewing sleep with newfound respect, curiosity, and even awe. So as we embark on this deep dive into psychology of sleep, I invite you to approach the topic with a sense of wonder. Consider that every night, when you close your eyes, you are not simply turning off, but rather entering a different mode of consciousness, one that is just as real, just as important, and in many ways just as mysterious as waking life itself. The nocturnal mind has much to teach us, if only we're willing to pay attention. Let us begin our journey into the night, the architecture of sleep, mapping the nocturnal landscape. When we talk about falling asleep, we use a metaphor that captures something essential about the experience, a sense of descending, of letting go, of gravity pulling us down into depths. But this falling is not a simple plunge into darkness. Rather, it is the beginning of an intricate journey through distinct psychological and neurological territories, each with its own characteristics, purposes, and contributions to our mental life. A typical night's sleep is not a uniform state, but rather a carefully choreographed sequence of stages that repeat in cycles throughout the night, each cycle lasting approximately 90 to 110 minutes. Most people experience 4 to 6 complete cycles per night, though this varies based on age, health, and individual differences. These cycles are not mere biological mechanisms. They represent different psychological states, each serving unique functions in our mental and emotional life. Understanding these stages is crucial because our psychological experience of sleep, our dreams, our memory consolidation, and our emotional processing all depend on moving through these stages in the proper sequence and proportion. When this architecture is disrupted, whether by sleep disorders, stress, substances, or environmental factors, the psychological consequences can be profound. The progression through sleep stages follows a predictable pattern, but one that shifts across the night. In the early part of the night, we spend more time in the deeper stages of non-REM sleep, which are crucial for physical restoration and certain types of memory consolidation. As the night progresses and dawn approaches, we spend increasingly more time in REM sleep, the stage most associated with vivid dreaming and emotional processing. This shifting architecture means that different parts of the night serve different psychological functions, a fact that becomes painfully apparent when we are deprived of either early or late sleep. Let's examine each stage of this nocturnal odyssey in detail, exploring not just the neurological events, but the psychological significance of each phase. Stage 1, the threshold between worlds. Stage 1 sleep, also called N1 in sleep science terminology, is a liminal space between waking and sleeping, typically lasting only 5 to 10 minutes under normal circumstances. This is the lightest stage of sleep, the threshold we cross as consciousness begins to dissolve. Psychologically, it is one of the most fascinating phases because it represents a transitional state of consciousness. We're neither fully awake nor truly asleep, but somewhere in between. During this stage, our brain wave begin to slow from the alert, active beta waves of wakefulness to the slower alpha waves, and eventually to the even slower theta waves characteristic of light sleep. Our muscles begin to relax, though they retain some tone. Our eye movements slow down. We become less responsive to external stimuli, though we can still be easily awakened. If aroused during this stage, we might insist we were never actually asleep, even though our brain activity clearly shows otherwise. From a psychological perspective, Stage 1 sleep is a time of hypnagogia, a term coined by the 19th century psychologist Alfred Maury to describe the peculiar mental phenomena that occur at the boundary of sleep. During hypnagogia, we may experience fleeting images, fragmentary thoughts, sudden insights, or strange sensory experiences. Some people report seeing geometric patterns, faces, or landscapes. Others hear voices or music. Some experience the sensation of falling, often accompanied by a sudden muscular jerk called a hypnic jerk or sleep start. These hypnagogic experiences have fascinated psychologists, artists, and inventors for centuries. The surrealist painter Salvador Dali famously used hypnagogia as a source of inspiration, holding a spoon over a metal plate and allowing himself to drift into this state, knowing that the spoon would clatter to the plate when he fell fully asleep, waking him to capture the strange imagery that arose. Thomas Edison reportedly used a similar technique, believing that the hypnagogic state fostered creative problem-solving. The psychological importance of this stage extends beyond its curiosity value. The hypnagogic state represents a time when the boundaries between conscious and unconscious mind become permeable. The logical, rational filtering that characterizes normal waking consciousness begins to relax, allowing unconscious material to bubble up into awareness. This is why solutions to problems sometimes appear during this twilight zone. The loosening of conscious control permits novel associations and insights that will be suppressed during full wakefulness. However, for some individuals, Stage 1 sleep can be psychologically problematic. People with anxiety may find it difficult to cross this threshold, their minds racing even as their bodies grow tired. The sensation of losing control that accompanies a descent into sleep can trigger panic in those who feel they must maintain constant vigilance. This is one reason why insomnia is so closely linked with anxiety disorders. The act of falling asleep requires a trust, a willingness to let go, that anxious individuals may find terrifying. Stage 2, settling into sleep. Following the brief transition of Stage 1, we enter Stage 2 sleep N2, which comprises the largest portion of our sleep time, approximately 45 to 55% of a normal night's sleep in adults. This stage typically lasts 10 to 25 minutes in the first cycle, but lengthens with each subsequent cycle through the night. During Stage 2 sleep, our brain waves continue to slow, but this stage is characterized by two distinctive patterns visible on electroencephalogram, e.g., recordings, sleep spindles, and K-complexes. These are not merely interesting neurological signatures. They represent the brain actively engaging in psychological work. Sleep spindles are sudden bursts of rapid, rhythmic brain wave activity that last for a second or two. Research has revealed that these spindles are associated with memory consolidation, particularly the integration of new information with existing knowledge. The more sleep spindles you produce, the better your memory performance tends to be. From a psychological perspective, we might think of sleep spindles as the brain's filing system, sorting through the day's experiences and deciding what to keep and where to store it. K-complexes are single, large waves that appear suddenly against the background of brain activity. They seem to serve multiple functions, including suppressing cortical arousal to help maintain sleep in the face of external stimuli, and participating in memory consolidation. Psychologically, K-complexes might be thought of as protective mechanisms, helping us stay asleep when we encounter potentially disrupting stimuli that aren't quite significant enough to warrant full awakening. Stage 2 sleep represents a kind of psychological settling. We are definitively asleep now. If awakened, we would acknowledge it, unlike in Stage 1. Yet we are still relatively close to consciousness. still somewhat aware of our environment in a vague, distant way. This is a restorative stage, but not the deepest rest. It's as if the mind is preparing for the profound work of deeper sleep stages, while beginning the essential tasks of memory processing and neural housekeeping. For individuals with certain psychological conditions, Stage 2 sleep can be revealing. People with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, often show altered patterns of sleep spindles and K-complexes, suggesting that trauma disrupts not just the subjective experience of sleep, but its fundamental architecture. Similarly, those with depression may spend disproportionate time in Stage 2 sleep at the expense of deeper, more restorative stages, a pattern that correlates with the cognitive difficulties and lack of refreshment that characterize depressed sleep. Stage 3, descent into the deep. Stage 3 sleep, also called slow-wave sleep, SWS, or deep sleep, is where we truly plunge into the depths of unconsciousness. This stage is characterized by delta waves, very slow, high-amplitude brain waves that represent profound shift in consciousness. During deep sleep, which accounts for roughly 15 to 25% of sleep time in adults, we are most difficult to awaken, and if awakened, we feel disoriented and confused. Psychologically, deep sleep is crucial in ways we are only beginning to fully appreciate. This is when the brain engages in its most intensive restoration and maintenance work. Blood flow to muscles increases, tissue growth and repair occur, energy is restored, and important hormones are released. But beyond these physical functions, deep sleep plays essential psychological roles. One of the most important psychological functions of slow-wave sleep is a consolidation of declarative memories, facts, events, and information. Research shows that newly learned information is replayed and strengthened during deep sleep, effectively moving from temporary storage to more permanent archives. When we study for an exam or learn new skills, it is during slow-wave sleep that much of this information becomes durably encoded in our brains. But memory consolidation is not simply about retention. It's about transformation. During deep sleep, the brain doesn't just record memories. It reorganizes them, extracts their essential patterns, and integrates them with existing knowledge structures. This is a profoundly psychological process. The person who wakes up after a night of good deep sleep has not simply stored yesterday's experiences. They have metabolized them, made meaning from them, and incorporated them into the ongoing narrative of their life. Deep sleep also appears to play a crucial role in emotional regulation and mental health. Studies have found that slow-wave sleep helps to downregulate the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, effectively providing a kind of emotional reset. People who are deprived of deep sleep show increased emotional reactivity, greater anxiety, and impaired ability to regulate their moods. Over time, chronic deficiency of slow-wave sleep is associated with increased risk of depression, anxiety disorders, and other mental health conditions. There is also a fascinating connection between deep sleep and the brain's waste clearance system. During slow-wave sleep, the glymphatic system, a waste clearance pathway that removes toxic proteins from the brain, becomes significantly more active. This includes clearing beta-amyloid, a protein associated with Alzheimer's disease. From a psychological perspective, this suggests that deep sleep literally cleanses our minds, removing the metabolic debris that accumulates during waking consciousness. When we deprive ourselves of deep sleep, we are, in a sense, allowing toxins to accumulate in our brains, a physical parallel to the psychological sense of mental fog and confusion that comes from sleep deprivation. Children spend much more time in deep sleep than adults, sometimes as much as 40% of their sleep time, which makes sense given the intensive brain development and learning that occurs during childhood. As we age, particularly after age 60, the amount of deep sleep we obtain declines markedly. This age-related reduction in slow-wave sleep correlates with memory difficulties and cognitive decline in older adults, suggesting that the loss of deep sleep may contribute to some of the psychological changes we associate with aging. Psychologically, deep sleep represents a state of profound letting go. We surrender not just consciousness, but our very sense of self. This is why practices that enhance deep sleep, such as meditation, regular exercise, and good sleep hygiene, often have such profound effects on psychological well-being. They are not simply improving rest. They are facilitating the deep psychological work that can only occur when consciousness fully releases its grip. REM sleep, the dreaming mind. After cycling through the stages of non-REM sleep, we enter what is perhaps the most psychologically fascinating stage, REM, rapid eye movement, sleep. This stage gets its name from the rapid, darting eye movements that characterize it, visible even through closed eyelids. During a typical night, we experience 4 to 6 REM periods, each lasting from a few minutes early in the night to as long as an hour in the final cycle before waking. REM sleep is paradoxical in nature. Brain activity during REM sleep looks remarkably similar to waking consciousness. In fact, if you saw an EEG of someone in REM sleep without knowing the context, you might think they were awake. The brain is highly active, consuming significant energy, and showing activation patterns that resemble those of an alert, awake mind. Yet the person is asleep, deeply unconscious of their external environment and experiencing vivid dreams. This paradox extends to the body as well. While the brain is active, the body undergoes a form of paralysis called REM atonia. The major voluntary muscle groups are temporarily paralyzed, preventing us from acting out our dreams. This paralysis is so complete that only the diaphragm for breathing, the heart, and the muscles controlling eye movement remain active. This disconnection between an active brain and a paralyzed body creates the conditions for one of the most mysterious aspects of human psychology, the dream. From a psychological perspective, REM sleep and dreaming represent a radically different mode of consciousness than either waking life or non-REM sleep. During REM, the logical, rational prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive function, planning, and rational thought, shows reduced activity. Meanwhile, the emotional centers of the brain, particularly the amygdala and other limbic structures, become highly active. Visual processing areas also show intense activation, which explains the vivid imagery of dreams. This creates a mental state characterized by intense emotion, vivid imagery, bizarre logical inconsistencies, and narrative fluidity. In our dreams, we accept impossibilities without question. We might fly, encounter deceased relatives, or find ourselves back in childhood homes. The laws of physics don't apply, and time becomes non-linear. Yet in the dream, all of this seems perfectly normal. This acceptance of the impossible is not a failure of cognition, but rather reflects a particular mode of consciousness that characterizes REM sleep, a mode in which emotion and association take precedence over logic and coherence. The psychological function of REM sleep and dreaming has been debated for over a century, from Freud's theory that dreams represent disguised wish fulfillment to more contemporary theories focus on emotional processing, memory consolidation, and threat simulation. Modern research suggests that REM sleep serves multiple psychological functions simultaneously. One crucial function is emotional processing and regulation. Studies have shown that REM sleep helps us process emotional experiences, particularly negative ones. The theory suggests that during REM sleep, we can reactivate emotional memories in a brain state characterized by reduced stress hormones, particularly noradrenaline. This allows us to process the emotional content of experiences without becoming overwhelmed by the emotion itself, a kind of natural therapy that occurs nightly. This emotional processing function explains why dreams often feature emotionally significant content, why we sometimes wake from dreams feeling resolved about issues that troubled us before sleep, and why deprivation of REM sleep leads to emotional instability and mood disturbances. It also suggests why certain psychological disorders, particularly PTSD and depression, are associated with disrupted REM sleep. These conditions may involve failures in emotional processing that REM sleep is meant to provide. REM sleep also appears crucial for certain types of memory consolidation, particularly procedural memories, how to do things, and emotional memories. While slow-wave sleep helps consolidate declarative memories, facts, and events, REM sleep seems especially important for integrating emotional significance into memories and for extracting general patterns and rules from specific experiences. This extraction of patterns, this movement from specific to general, has important implications for learning, creativity, and psychological flexibility. Some researchers have proposed that REM sleep and dreaming serve an evolutionary function related to threat simulation. Dreams often involve threatening or challenging scenarios, being chased, falling, confronting difficult social situations, facing dangers. The theory suggests that dreams provide a safe space to rehearse responses to threats, helping us prepare for challenges in waking life. From a psychological perspective, this might explain why anxiety dreams are so common and why dreams often seem to exaggerate or amplify our waking concerns. They're not tormenting us, but rather helping us prepare. There's also intriguing research suggesting that REM sleep fosters creativity and insight, the loosening of logical constraints, the free association of ideas, and the novel combinations of disparate elements that characterize dreams may facilitate creative problem-solving. The famous examples of discoveries made in dreams, Kekulé's discovery of the benzene ring structure, Mendeleev's organization of the periodic table, may reflect REM sleep's capacity to make connections that waking consciousness overlooks. Psychologically, REM sleep represents a time when the unconscious mind comes to the foreground. The tight control that consciousness normally maintains over our thoughts relaxes, allowing unconscious material, fears, desires, unprocessed emotions, creative insights, to emerge in symbolic form. This is why paying attention to dreams can be psychologically revealing, and why dream analysis has been central to many forms of psychotherapy. Dreams are not random neural noise, but rather meaningful psychological productions that, when properly understood, can offer insight into our inner lives. The deprivation of REM sleep has profound psychological consequences. People deprived specifically of REM sleep, a tricky thing to do, requiring waking someone whenever they enter REM, show increased irritability, anxiety, difficulty concentrating, and memory problems. Interestingly, after REM deprivation, the brain shows REM rebound, spending more time in REM sleep than usual, as if trying to catch up on missed psychological work. This rebound suggests that REM sleep is not a luxury but a necessity, that the psychological functions it serves are essential enough that the brain prioritizes making up for lost REM time. The ultradian rhythm, why we cycle. The cycling through these sleep stages, light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep, and back again, follows what's called an ultradian rhythm, a biological cycle shorter than 24 hours, in contrast to circadian rhythms, which are 24-hour cycles. But why do we cycle? Why not simply remain in deep, restorative sleep all night, or spend an entire night dreaming? The answer appears to lie in the different psychological functions served by different sleep stages. Deep sleep is crucial for physical restoration and certain types of memory consolidation, but remaining in deep sleep continuously will prevent the emotional processing and creativity enhancement of REM sleep. Similarly, REM sleep serves essential psychological functions, but we also need the restorative benefits of deep sleep. The cycling allows the brain to accomplish multiple, sometimes competing, psychological objectives in a single night. There's also something psychologically profound about this cycling structure. It mirrors other cyclical patterns in human psychology, the ebb and flow of attention, the rhythm of engagement and withdrawal in relationships, the alternation between focused work and diffuse thinking. The sleep cycle might be understood as a blueprint for how the psyche naturally organizes itself. periods of intensive processing alternating with periods of restoration, periods of emotional engagement alternating with periods of factual consolidation. The timing of these cycles also matters psychologically. The fact that we get more deep sleep early in the night and more REM sleep later has practical implications. If we go to bed very late or wake very early, we disproportionately cut into REM sleep, losing the emotional processing and creative enhancement it provides. This may explain why shift workers and people with irregular sleep schedules often experience mood disturbances and reduced creativity. They're missing the psychological benefits of early morning REM sleep. Understanding the architecture of sleep, this carefully structured journey through different stages of consciousness, helps us appreciate why sleep is not simply turning off for 8 hours. Each stage serves specific psychological purposes, and the cycling through stages allows the mind to accomplish the complex, multifaceted psychological work that sleep enables. When we honor this architecture by prioritizing consistent, adequate sleep, we support our own psychological flourishing. When we disrupt it through sleep deprivation, irregular schedules, substances, or disorders, we undermine the very foundations of our mental health. The dream experience, characteristics of a strange state. Dreams represent one of the most universal, yet most mysterious aspects of human psychology. Every culture throughout history has experienced dreams, attributed significance to them, and developed theories about their meaning and origin. Despite this universality, dreams remain deeply personal, subjective experiences that resist easy categorization or complete explanation. What exactly is a dream? At the most basic level, a dream is a succession of images, ideas, emotions, and sensations that occur involuntarily in the mind during certain stages of sleep, particularly REM sleep. But this clinical definition fails to capture the psychological richness of the dream experience, the vividness, the emotional intensity, the narrative quality, however bizarre, and the sense that dreams are somehow meaningful, even when we cannot articulate that meaning. Dreams have several distinctive psychological characteristics that distinguish them from waking thought. First, there is a phenomenon of dream immersion. When we dream, we are typically fully engaged in the dream experience, accepting its reality without question. We do not observe the dream from the outside. We are in it, experiencing it as if it were real. This immersion is so complete that we may feel genuine fear, joy, desire, or sadness in response to dream events, with physiological correlates to match: racing heart, tears, sexual arousal. Second, dreams are characterized by a peculiar form of logic that might be called dream rationality. In a dream, we accept impossibilities and inconsistencies that would be immediately recognized as absurd in waking life. A friend might transform into a stranger mid-conversation, or we might find ourselves simultaneously in our childhood home and our current workplace. Physics doesn't work properly. We can fly, or find ourselves unable to run despite desperate effort. Yet none of this strikes us as odd while we're dreaming. The critical, analytical function that would flag these impossibilities is suspended during the dream state. Third, dreams show intense sensory vividness, particularly visual vividness, but sometimes involving other senses as well. Colors may seem more saturated, spaces more vast or more claustrophobic, faces more expressive. Some people report dreaming in elaborate detail, seeing textures and shadows they might not notice in waking life. Others report auditory dreams with music, conversations, or ambient sounds. Less commonly, people report tactile, olfactory, or gustatory dream sensations, touch, smell, taste, that feel entirely real. Fourth, dreams have a narrative quality, even when the narrative makes little logical sense. Dreams tell stories, even if those stories are fragmentary, nonlinear, or absurd. There are characters, settings, events, and some sense of sequence. This narrative quality is psychologically significant because it suggests that the dreaming mind is not simply producing random neural noise, but rather constructing meaningful, if bizarre, sequences of experience. Fifth, dreams are characterized by heightened emotionality. The emotional tone of dreams is often more intense than everyday waking experience. We may feel overwhelming fear in nightmares, profound joy in pleasant dreams, intense frustration in stress dreams, or deep sadness in grief dreams. The limbic system, the brain's emotional center, is highly active during REM sleep, which explains its emotional intensity. Psychologically, this suggests that dreams are particularly concerned with emotional content, that one function of dreaming may be to process and integrate emotional experiences. Finally, dreams are characterized by what we might call motivated forgetting. Most dreams fade rapidly upon waking, sometimes within seconds. We may wake with a strong sense that we dreamed vividly, but be unable to recall specific content. This forgetting appears to be an active process, not merely passive decay. The brain seems designed to forget most dream content, perhaps because retaining all our dreams would create confusion between dream memory and waking memory. Psychologically, this raises interesting questions. Are forgotten dreams still psychologically influential? Do they process material without our conscious awareness? And what determines which dreams we remember? Freud and the psychoanalytic view. Dreams as wish fulfillment. No discussion of dream psychology would be complete without considering Sigmund Freud, whose 1900 book, The Interpretation of Dreams, fundamentally shaped how Western culture thinks about dreams. Freud called dreams a royal road to the unconscious, believing that dream analysis could reveal hidden desires, repress conflicts, and unconscious motivations that were inaccessible through normal waking consciousness. Freud's central thesis was that dreams represent disguised wish fulfillment. According to this theory, we all harbor wishes and desires, particularly sexual and aggressive desires, that are unacceptable to our conscious, socialized selves. These desires are repressed, pushed down into the unconscious mind where they cannot disturb our waking awareness. But during sleep, when conscious defenses are relaxed, these unconscious wishes attempt to emerge into consciousness. However, even in sleep, a psychological censor remains active, disguising these wishes so they can be expressed without causing the dreamer to awaken anxiety or guilt. This disguise work creates the dream's manifest content, the actual narrative and imagery that we experience and remember. Beneath this lies the latent content, the true unconscious wishes that the dream is expressing in coded form. Dream analysis, in Freud's view, involves working backward from manifest to latent content, decoding the symbolism to reveal the hidden wishes beneath. Freud identified several mechanisms by which the dream work transforms latent wishes into manifest content. Condensation involves combining multiple ideas or people into a single dream image. For example, a dream character who has features of several different people might represent feelings about all of them compressed into one symbol. Displacement involves shifting emotional intensity from one element to another. We might dream of being mildly annoyed with a stranger when we're actually furious with a loved one, displacing the emotion to a safer target. Symbolism was perhaps the most famous and most criticized aspect of Freudian dream interpretation. Freud believed that certain dream symbols had relatively fixed meanings, particularly symbols related to sexuality. Long objects might represent male genitalia, while containers or enclosed spaces might represent female genitalia. A dream of climbing stairs might represent sexual intercourse. While Freud cautioned against mechanical interpretation and acknowledged that symbols could have individual meanings, his emphasis on sexual symbolism became both influential and controversial. From a psychological perspective, Freud's contribution was not primarily in the specifics of his interpretations, many of which are now considered overly reductionistic, but rather in several broader insights. First, He established the idea that dreams are psychologically meaningful rather than random nonsense. Second, he suggested that dreams express aspects of ourselves that we may not consciously acknowledge. Third, he recognized that dreams use symbolic, metaphorical language rather than direct expression. And fourth, he understood that paying attention to dreams could provide psychological insight and therapeutic benefit. However, Freudian theory has significant limitations from a modern psychological perspective. The emphasis on disguise and censorship now seems overstated. Contemporary research suggests that dreams often represent concerns quite directly rather than hiding them in elaborate codes. The focus on sexual and aggressive wishes as the primary content of all dreams seems narrow and reductionistic, ignoring the many other concerns that occupy human psychology. And the assumption that all dreams involve wish fulfillment has been challenged by the prevalence of anxiety dreams, nightmares, and dreams that seem to represent our fears rather than our wishes. Despite these limitations, Freud's essential insight that dreams provide a window into psychological content that may not be fully accessible in waking consciousness remains influential. Many contemporary psychotherapists, particularly those with psychodynamic orientations, continue to explore dreams with clients as a way of accessing unconscious material, though usually with more flexibility and less rigid interpretive frameworks than Freud employed. Jung and the collective unconscious, dreams as messages. Carl Jung, initially a follower of Freud who later broke away to develop his own psychological theories, offered a different and in many ways richer understanding of dreams. While Freud saw dreams primarily as wish fulfillment requiring interpretation to unmask disguised content, Jung viewed dreams as natural, spontaneous psychological productions that communicate in their own language, the language of symbols and images, without necessarily hiding or disguising anything. Jung believed that dreams serve a compensatory function, balancing our conscious attitudes and experiences. If we are too one-sided in waking life, too rational in neglecting emotion, too extrovert in neglecting inner reflection, too identified with persona and neglecting shadow, our dreams will present the other side, the neglected aspects, seeking to restore psychological balance. Dreams, in Jung's view, are not trying to deceive us, but rather to guide us toward wholeness, toward integration of all aspects of our psyche. A central concept in Jungian dream psychology is the collective unconscious, beyond the personal unconscious, which contains our individual repressed or forgotten experiences. Similar to Freud's concept, Jung proposed that we also have access to a deeper layer of unconscious shared by all humanity. This collective unconscious contains what Jung called archetypes, universal patterns, themes, and images that appear across cultures and throughout history in myths, religions, fairy tales, and importantly, in dreams. Archetypal dreams feature universal symbols and patterns. The wise old man or woman offering guidance, the shadow figure representing rejected aspects of self, the anima or animus representing the conscious sexual aspects of our psyche, the divine child representing potential and new beginnings, the trickster upsetting order and convention, the great mother representing nurturance or devouring. When these archetypal figures and patterns appear in dreams, Jung believed they were expressing something not merely personal but transpersonal, connecting us to the collective wisdom of humanity. This has profound psychological implications. It suggests that our dreams are not just processing yesterday's events or expressing individual conflicts. They are tapping into deep patterns of human experience, patterns that have been relevant to humans throughout our evolutionary history. An archetypal dream might offer wisdom or perspective that transcends our individual conscious knowledge because it draws on this collective well of human experience. Jung also emphasized what he called the perspective function of dreams, their tendency to point toward future possibilities and potential developments. While Freud looked backward at childhood and repressed wishes, Jung often looked forward, seeing dreams as exploring possible future paths, trying out different approaches, and guiding the dreamer towards psychological growth. This perspective function makes dreams relevant not just for understanding the past, but for navigating the present and future. Psychologically, the Jungian approach invites a relationship with dreams characterized by respect and curiosity rather than suspicion and interpretation. Rather than assuming dreams are hiding something that must be decoded, the Jungian approach assumes dreams are revealing something that must be witnessed and contemplated. The dreamer is invited to sit with dream images, to feel into their emotional resonance, to notice associations and amplifications rather than reducing symbols to fixed meanings. Jung's approach also recognizes that dreams can have spiritual significance. Some dreams, particularly those with powerful archetypal content, may represent encounters with the numinous, with the sacred, with dimensions of reality that transcend the personal ego. This opens psychology to the spiritual dimensions of human experience in a way that Freud's more reductionistic approach did not. Contemporary dream psychology has been enriched by Jung's insights, particularly in approaches that emphasize the wisdom of dreams, their symbolic language, their compensatory and perspective functions, and their potential for guiding psychological growth and individuation, Jung's term for the lifelong process of becoming more fully oneself. Contemporary neuroscience, the activation synthesis hypothesis, and beyond. The late 20th century brought a scientific revolution in dream research with the development of brain imaging technologies and more sophisticated neuroscientific methods. One of the most influential theories to emerge from this era was the activation synthesis hypothesis, proposed by psychiatrists J. Allen Hobson and Robert McCarley in 1977. The activation synthesis hypothesis challenged psychoanalytic dream theories by proposing that dreams result from a brain's attempt to make sense of random neural activity during REM sleep. According to this theory, the brainstem sends random signals upward to the cortex during REM sleep, the activation, and the cortex tries to create a coherent narrative from these signals, the synthesis. Dreams, in this view, are essentially the brain's best attempt to construct meaning from neural noise, a kind of physiological byproduct rather than a psychologically meaningful communication from the unconscious. This theory was initially received as debunking traditional psychology, suggesting that dreams were essentially meaningless and that the elaborate interpretive frameworks of Freud and Jung were misguided. However, the psychological implications of activation synthesis are actually more nuanced and interesting than they might first appear. Even if dreams begin with random neural activation, the way the brain synthesizes this activity into narrative is far from random. It draws on our memories, concerns, emotions, and psychological preoccupations. The content that appears in dreams, even if triggered by random signals, is selected from our psychological database. The narratives we construct, even from random starting points, reflect our narrative patterns, our emotional concerns, our cognitive habits. So even under the activation synthesis model, dreams remain psychologically revealing, just in a different way than Freud imagined. Moreover, subsequent research has challenged the pure randomness assumption of the original activation synthesis hypothesis. While some aspects of REM sleep physiology may be random, brain imaging studies show that dreams involve activation of specific brain regions associated with emotion, memory, and visual processing. The patterns of activation are not entirely random. They show meaningful structure related to the dream content being experienced. Contemporary neuroscience has moved toward more integrated theories that recognize both the neurological substrata of dreaming and the psychological meaningfulness of dream content. These theories propose that dreams reflect the brain's ongoing processes of memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and integration of experience, processes that are psychologically significant even if they don't fit neatly into classical psychoanalytic frameworks. One influential contemporary theory is the threat simulation theory, proposed by evolutionary psychologist Annie Ravanchuo. This theory suggests that dreaming evolved as a mechanism for simulating threatening events, allowing us to rehearse responses to dangers in a safe environment. From a psychological perspective, this would explain why dreams so often involve anxiety, threat, and challenge. Not because we're neurotically focused on danger, but because rehearsing responses to threats would have had survival value throughout our evolutionary history. Another important contemporary framework is the emotional processing theory, which proposes that REM sleep and dreaming serve to process emotional experiences, particularly negative ones. Research by Matthew Walker and others has shown that REM sleep appears to help us process emotional memories by reactivating them in a brain state characterized by reduced noradrenaline, a stress hormone. This allows us to separate the emotional memory from the emotional charge, maintaining the information while reducing its effective intensity. Psychologically, this is a kind of natural exposure therapy that happens nightly. The continuity hypothesis, supported by research showing that dream content typically reflects waking life concerns, thoughts, and experiences, suggests that dreams are continuous with waking consciousness rather than radically different. What we think about during the day, we tend to dream about at night. However, dreams don't simply replay daytime events. They recombine elements, emphasize emotional significance, and explore variations and alternatives. This gives dreams psychological relevance as a space where we continue to work on waking concerns in a different mode of consciousness. There's also growing interest in the neuroscience of lucid dreaming, dreams in which the dreamer becomes aware they are dreaming and may even exert some control over dream content. Brain imaging studies of lucid dreaming show a fascinating hybrid state. Some brain regions show patterns typical of REM sleep, while others, particularly in the frontal lobes, show activation more typical of waking consciousness. This suggests that consciousness is not all or nothing, but rather a matter degree, and that awareness can be cultivated even within the dream state. Psychologically, lucid dreaming has been explored as a potential tool for psychological growth, trauma processing, and creative exploration. The neuroscientific perspective has enriched rather than replaced psychological approaches to dreams. We now understand that dreams emerge from specific brain states and neural processes, but these processes are intimately connected to psychological functions, memory, emotion, meaning-making, and consciousness itself. Dreams are simultaneously neurological events and psychological experiences, and understanding them fully requires attention to both levels of analysis. The content of dreams. What do we dream about? One of the most straightforward ways to understand the psychology of dreams is to examine their content. What do people actually dream about? Systematic research on dream content, pioneered by Calvin Hall and Robert Van de Castle in the 1960s, has revealed fascinating patterns. First, dreams are remarkably mundane in many respects. While we remember our bizarre or emotionally intense dreams most vividly, content analysis reveals that many dreams involve ordinary settings, homes, workplaces, schools, familiar people, and everyday activities. We dream about conversations, travel, eating, working, the stuff of daily life. This ordinariness supports the continuity hypothesis. Dreams reflect our waking preoccupations and concerns. However, within this generally familiar framework, dreams show distinctive patterns that reveal psychological regularities. Negative emotions in dreams are more common than positive emotions. Anxiety, fear, and frustration appear more often than joy or contentment. This negativity bias makes sense from both evolutionary and psychological perspectives. Threats and problems demand more processing than pleasant experiences. They're more psychologically urgent. Dreams may emphasize negative emotional content because this is what most needs to be processed and integrated. Certain themes appear with remarkable frequency across cultures and individuals. Dreams of being chased or attacked, of falling, of being unprepared for an examination or performance, of losing teeth, of being unable to move or speak, of being naked in public, of discovering new rooms in a familiar house. These and other themes occur across different dreamers and different cultures. The universality of these themes suggests they tap into fundamental human psychological concerns, vulnerability, competence, social acceptance, the fear of loss, the discovery of hidden potentials. Dream content also shows age-related patterns that reflect developmental psychology. Children's dreams are often shorter and more static than adults' dreams, with less narrative complexity. Young children often dream of animals, while adolescents' dreams show increasing social content and the appearance of romantic and sexual themes. Older adults' dreams may include more references to the past and more themes related to health concerns. These developmental changes in dream content mirror the shifting psychological concerns of different life stages. Gender differences in dream content have also been documented, though they are generally smaller than popular stereotypes might suggest. Women's dreams more often include both male and female characters, while men's dreams more often feature predominantly male characters. Women's dreams show slightly more emotion and more indoor settings, while men's dreams show slightly more physical aggression and outdoor settings. These patterns likely reflect both cultural gender role expectations and possibly some evolutionary differences in psychological concerns. Cultural factors also shape dream content in interesting ways. While the basic processes of dreaming appear universal, the specific content is influenced by cultural context. People in traditional hunter-gatherer societies dream more often of animals and natural elements than people in industrial societies. People in collectivist cultures dream more often about groups and social harmony, while those in individualist cultures dream more about personal achievement and autonomy. The emotional tone of dreams can also vary. Some cultures report more positive dream emotions than others, possibly reflecting different cultural attitudes towards sleep, dreaming, and emotional expression. Personal psychological factors profoundly influence dream content. People with depression have dreams with more themes of loss, failure, and negative self-representation. Those with anxiety disorders have more frequent nightmare and more dreams involving threat. Individuals with PTSD often experience recurring nightmares related to their traumatic experiences. Creative individuals tend to report more vivid, bizarre, and original dream content. These correlations suggest that dreams both reflect and may contribute to psychological states. They are influenced by our psychology, but also influence it in return through their effects on mood, memory, and meaning-making. Life circumstances also shape dreams. During times of stress, our dreams reflect our stressors. During pregnancy, women often dream about babies' birth and maternal themes. After significant life changes, moving to a new place, starting a new job, ending a relationship, dreams often process the change, exploring its implications and working through associated emotions. When we're learning new skills or knowledge, we often dream about the domain we're learning, which likely reflects the consolidation processes occurring during sleep. Perhaps most poignantly, dreams reflect our deepest longings and fears. We dream about people we've lost, sometimes experiencing bittersweet reunions with deceased loved ones. We dream about hopes and aspirations, sometimes experiencing in dreams what we deeply wish for in waking life. We dream about our insecurities and vulnerabilities, confronting in dream form what we might avoid acknowledging consciously. This emotional honesty in dreams, the way they surface what we really care about beneath our conscious defenses, is precisely why they can be so psychologically revealing. Dream interpretation, making meaning. Given that dreams are psychologically significant, the question naturally arises, how should we interpret them? How do we extract meaning from these strange nocturnal narratives? The contemporary psychological approach to dream interpretation has become more nuanced and individualized than classical psychoanalytic methods. Rather than applying fixed symbolic meanings or assuming universal interpretations, modern approaches emphasize the unique significance of dreams for each individual dreamer. Several principles guide this interpretive work. First, consider the emotional tone. The emotion you experience in a dream is often more significant than the literal content. A dream's emotional core provides a clue to what psychological material is being processed. If you wake from a dream feeling anxious, even if the dream content seems mundane, that anxiety is meaningful information about your psychological state. Similarly, dreams that leave you feeling joyful, sad, angry, or confused are communicating through emotion as much as through content. Second, look for personal associations. What does a particular dream symbol or element mean to you specifically? A dog in a dream might represent loyalty for one person, fear for another who was bitten as a child, or companionship for someone grieving a lost pet. The personal association, the meaning the symbol has in your life, is more relevant than any universal symbolic interpretation. This principle, emphasized by both Freud and Jung despite their other differences, respects the individual nature of psychological experience. Third, consider the context of your waking life. Dreams don't arise in a vacuum. They respond to current life circumstances, preoccupations, and concerns. A dream about being unprepared for an exam might literally reflect anxiety about an upcoming test. But for someone long out of school, it might metaphorically represent feeling unprepared for any challenging situation, a job interview, a difficult conversation, a new responsibility. Understanding what's happening in your waking life provides essential context for interpreting dream content. Fourth, notice patterns and recurring themes. A single dream might be difficult to interpret, but patterns across multiple dreams often reveal psychological themes. Do you often dream of missing transportation, trains, planes, buses? This might represent anxiety about opportunities passing you by. Do authority figures frequently appear in your dreams? This might reflect issues with power, rules, or your relationship with authority. Recurring nightmares almost certainly point to unprocessed psychological material that needs attention. Fifth, attend to the narrative arc. Even bizarre dreams usually have some narrative structure, a beginning, middle, and end or resolution, even if that resolution is simply waking up. How does the dream story unfold? What conflicts arise? How are they resolved, or do they remain unresolved? The narrative structure can reveal how you're psychologically approaching challenges or processing experiences. 6. Consider multiple levels of meaning. Dreams are rich, multi-layered productions that can mean several things simultaneously. A dream about your childhood home might be about nostalgia for the past, unresolved childhood issues, feelings of safety or entrapment, or reflections on how far you've come since then, or all of these at once. Holding multiple interpretive possibilities allows for deeper exploration than settling on a single correct meaning. 7th, work with a dream rather than just analyzing it. Some therapeutic approaches encourage not just interpreting dreams, but actively engaging with them through techniques like Gestalt dream work, where you imaginatively become different elements of the dream and speak from their perspective. Dream reentry, where you imaginatively return to a dream and explore it further or change its outcome, or active imagination, where you continue the dream in a waking fantasy. These approaches treat dreams as living psychological material that can be worked with dynamically rather than static texts to be decoded. Finally, respect the mystery. Not all dreams need to be interpreted, and not all dreams will yield to interpretation. Some dreams may be processing material in ways that don't need conscious understanding. Some may be reflecting neural processes without deep psychological significance. Some may be exploring symbolic territories that our conscious minds cannot easily translate into literal meanings. Approaching dreams with curiosity and respect rather than a determination to decode every element allows for a more sustainable and psychologically valuable relationship with dreaming. It's also worth noting when professional help with dreams might be valuable. If nightmares are frequent and disturbing enough to impact your waking life, if dreams seem to be processing traumatic material that feels overwhelming, or if dream exploration brings up psychological issues that feel too difficult to navigate alone, Working with therapists who values and understands dreams can be profoundly helpful. Many psychodynamic, Jungian, and existential therapists incorporate dream work into their practice. Nightmares and dark dreams. When dreams frighten. While much dream discussion focuses on potentially useful or interesting aspects of dreams, we must also address the darker side. Nightmares, recurring bad dreams, and traumatic dreams that disturb rather than restore. These difficult dreams are psychologically significant precisely because of their emotional impact. Nightmares are intense anxiety dreams that typically wake us with strong negative emotion: fear, horror, anger, sadness, or disgust. They're distinguished from bad dreams, which are unpleasant but don't wake us, by this awakening component. Most people experience occasional nightmares, but for some, they become frequent enough to impact sleep quality and waking functioning. From a psychological perspective, nightmares serve important functions despite their distressing nature. They often represent the psyche's attempt to process threatening or overwhelming material. When we experience something frightening, confusing, or emotionally intense that we cannot fully process in waking consciousness, the dream state may try to work through it, resulting in nightmares. In this sense, nightmares are psychological digestion, sometimes unpleasant but ultimately aimed at integration. Certain psychological conditions are associated with increased nightmare frequency. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is characterized by recurring nightmares that replay or symbolically represent traumatic events. These trauma nightmares differ from ordinary nightmares in their repetitive, unchanging quality and their intense distress. They represent the psyche's struggle to integrate an experience that violated basic assumptions about safety, meaning, or control. The repetitive replaying suggests that the normal processing functions of REM sleep are overwhelmed or disrupted by the trauma's intensity. Anxiety and depression are also associated with more frequent nightmares. The heightened threat sensitivity of anxiety can manifest in dreams full of danger and helplessness. Depression's negative emotional tone and pessimistic thinking patterns can color dreams with themes of loss, failure, and hopelessness. In both cases, nightmares both reflect and may exacerbate the waking psychological condition, creating a cycle where psychological distress leads to disturbed sleep, which in turn worsens psychological distress. Certain medications, particularly some antidepressants, blood pressure medications, and drugs affecting neurotransmitter systems, can increase nightmare frequency as a side effect. This demonstrates that nightmares have a neurochemical component. They're not purely psychological, but emerge in the interaction of brain chemistry and psychological content. Psychologically, the content of nightmares is often revealing. Common nightmare themes include being chased or attacked, falling, being trapped or unable to move, arriving late or being unprepared, experiencing harm to loved ones, or finding oneself in dangerous natural scenarios, fires, floods, earthquakes. These themes often represent fundamental psychological vulnerabilities: fear of harm, loss of control, failure, loss of significant others, or environmental threat. Some psychologists view nightmares as having an adaptive function despite their distress. The threat simulation theory suggests that nightmares, like other anxiety dreams, may help us rehearse responses to dangers, preparing our psychological and behavioral responses for potential real-world threats. From this perspective, even recurring nightmares might represent the psyche's persistent effort to master threatening material by repeatedly exposing us to it in a safe context. There are evidence-based psychological treatments for chronic nightmares. Imagery rehearsal therapy, IRT, involves recalling the nightmare while awake, then imagining a changed version with a less distressing outcome, and rehearsing this new version regularly. This technique has shown effectiveness for reducing nightmare frequency and distress, suggesting that we can psychologically reshape our dream content through conscious intention and practice. Another approach, exposure, relaxation, and rescripting therapy, ERRT, combines exposure to the nightmare content, relaxation training, and rescripting of the nightmare. These approaches demonstrate that nightmares, while arising from unconscious processes during sleep, can be influenced by conscious, waking interventions. This gives nightmare sufferers a sense of agency and hope rather than helplessness. From a depth psychology perspective, nightmares might also be understood as urgent messages from the unconscious, using fear to get our attention. The recurring nightmare that won't go away might be signaling an issue in waking life that needs to be addressed, an unresolved conflict, an unacknowledged fear, a situation we're avoiding confronting. Sometimes work can understand the symbolic meaning of a nightmare and addressing the underlying psychological issue can resolve the nightmare more effectively than trying to suppress or change it. It's also worth noting the phenomenon of night terrors, which differ from nightmares. Night terrors occur during deep non-REM sleep rather than during REM sleep, involve intense fear and autonomic arousal, and typically are not remembered. They're more common in children, and usually don't reflect psychological problems, but rather represent a kind of arousal disorder. Understanding the difference between night terrors and nightmares prevents misattribution and unnecessary psychological concern. The memory consolidation process during sleep. One of the most well-established psychological functions of sleep is memory consolidation, the process by which temporary, fragile memories become stable, long-term memories. This is not merely a passive process of storage, but rather an active transformation of experience that has profound implications for learning, identity, and psychological continuity. When we experience something new, learn a fact, acquire a skill, have an emotional experience, that information is initially encoded in a relatively unstable form. The memory is fragile, susceptible to interference and loss. Sleep, particularly the different stages of sleep, plays a crucial role in stabilizing these memories, integrating them with existing knowledge, and even transforming them in ways that enhance their usefulness. Different types of memories are consolidated during different sleep stages, which explains why the complete architecture of sleep is important. Declarative memories, facts, events, explicit knowledge, are particularly strengthened during slow-wave sleep, the deep sleep that predominates in the first half of the night. During this stage, newly encoded memories are replayed and strengthened, and their connections to existing knowledge networks are enhanced. This is why studying before sleep can be more effective than studying at other times. The subsequent sleep consolidates what was learned. Procedural memories, how to do things, skills, and habits, are consolidated more during REM sleep and stage 2 sleep. When you practice a musical instrument, a sport, or any motor skill, much of the learning happens during subsequent sleep. Musicians often report that a piece that felt difficult when practiced and it feels easier the next morning. Athletes find that technique improves with sleep. This is not just physical rest allowing tired muscles to recover. It's the brain actively strengthening the neural patterns that encode skill performance. Emotional memories, experiences with strong affective content, are processed during REM sleep, as discussed earlier. But this processing does more than just consolidate the memory. It appears to change a memory's emotional quality, preserving the information while reducing its emotional intensity. This emotional decoupling is psychologically crucial for adaptive functioning. We need to remember negative experiences to learn from them, but we don't need, and indeed cannot tolerate, maintaining their full emotional intensity indefinitely. The consolidation process is not simply about making memories stronger. It's also about making them more useful. During sleep, particularly during slow-wave sleep, the brain appears to extract patterns and general principles from specific experiences. If you spend an afternoon learning multiple examples of concept, sleep helps you extract the underlying concept rather than just remembering the individual examples. This extraction of general knowledge from specific instances is fundamental to learning and intelligence. Sleep also appears to reorganize memories, finding connections between seemingly unrelated information. This reorganization can lead to insights and creative solutions that were not apparent during waking study. The classic sleep on it, advice for difficult problems, has scientific support. Sleep genuinely enhances problem solving, not just through rest, but through active cognitive restructuring during sleep. There's also evidence for a process called synaptic homeostasis during sleep. The theory suggests that during waking hours, learning and experience strengthen synaptic connections throughout the brain, and this strengthening uses energy and resources. During sleep, particularly slow-wave sleep, there's a renormalization. Stronger, more important connections are maintained while weaker, less important ones are pruned. This prevents the brain from becoming overwhelmed with too many strong connections and helps maintain efficiency. Psychologically, this might be understood as a kind of forgetting, but it's adaptive forgetting, retaining what's important and releasing what's not. The implications of sleep-dependent memory consolidation for psychology are profound. First, it means that learning is not complete when study or practice ends. Sleep is an essential final stage of the learning process. Students who cram all night before exams are not just tired during the test. They're also attempting to use memories that haven't been properly consolidated, which is less effective than studying over multiple days with sleep between sessions. Second, it suggests that our identity and sense of autobiographical continuity depend on sleep. Our memories are not just stored during sleep. They're integrated into the ongoing narrative of our lives. When sleep is chronically disrupted, this integration process suffers, which may contribute to cognitive fragmentation and sense of discontinuity that people with severe sleep disorders sometimes report. Third, it implies that psychological symptoms related to memory, such as intrusive memories in PTSD or ruminative memories in depression, might be understood partly as failures of normal sleep-dependent memory processing. When REM sleep is disrupted or abnormal, emotional memories may not be properly processed, maintaining their intense effective charge and their intrusive quality. Some experimental treatments for PTSD have explored targeting sleep and dreams as a way to facilitate the processing of traumatic memories. Sleep deprivation and cognitive impairment. If sleep consolidates and enhances memory, what happens when we don't get enough sleep? The cognitive and psychological consequences of sleep deprivation have been extensively studied, and the findings paint a concerning picture of widespread impairment. Even modest sleep restriction, getting 6 hours per night instead of 8, for example, leads to measurable cognitive impairment that accumulates over time. Attention becomes less focused, reaction time slow, working memory capacity decreases, and decision-making becomes impaired. Perhaps most concerning, people who are sleep-deprived often don't recognize the extent of their impairment. They feel they're functioning normally even as objective measures show significant deficits. This subjective-objective mismatch has important psychological implications. It means that individuals who are chronically sleep-deprived, and in modern society, this is a large proportion of the population, may be unaware that their cognitive functioning is compromised. They might attribute difficulties to other causes, stress, age, difficulty of tasks, without recognizing that inadequate sleep is the underlying factor. The effects of sleep deprivation on memory are particularly well documented. When sleep deprived, our ability to encode new memories is impaired. We're less able to form memories in the first place. This is why learning while exhausted is so inefficient. Additionally, memories formed while sleep deprived are not consolidated as effectively during subsequent sleep. There's also evidence that sleep deprivation can lead to the formation of false memories. We become more suggestible and more likely to remember things that didn't actually happen. Psychologically, these memory impairments can be distressing. People may worry they're developing serious cognitive problems when in fact their memory difficulties would resolve with adequate sleep. Students may attribute poor academic performance to lack of ability rather than lack of sleep. Older adults may attribute memory problems to age-related decline, when sleep quality, which often worsens with age, is the more significant factor. Sleep deprivation also affects emotional memory specifically. Research shows that when sleep deprived, we form stronger memory traces for negative emotional information, while memory for positive and neutral information is impaired. This negativity bias can contribute to the emotional dysregulation and negative mood that accompanies sleep deprivation. The world seems darker, more threatening, and more frustrating when we're exhausted, partly because our memory systems are biasing us toward remembering negative experiences. The cumulative nature of sleep debt is psychologically important. Sleep deprivation doesn't reset when we finally get one good night's sleep. After a week of inadequate sleep, a single night of recovery sleep will help, but it won't fully restore functioning. The cognitive and psychological deficits accumulate, and recovering from significant sleep debt requires multiple nights of adequate sleep. Chronic sleep restriction also appears to have long-term consequences for brain health and cognitive aging. Epidemiological studies show associations between chronic sleep problems and increased risk of cognitive decline and dementia. While these studies don't prove that sleep problems cause cognitive decline, the relationship might be bidirectional or mediated by other factors. They do suggest that adequate sleep throughout life might be protective for long-term brain health. From a psychological perspective, the cognitive impairments of sleep deprivation don't exist in isolation. They interact with and exacerbate other psychological challenges. An anxious person who is sleep deprived will find their anxiety harder to manage. A depressed person who isn't sleeping well will find their depressive symptoms worse. Someone facing a demanding situation, exams, a work crisis, relationship stress, will cope less effectively if sleep deprived. Sleep adequacy is not just one factor among many in psychological functioning. It's a foundational factor that influences everything else. Sleep and learning. Implications for education. The relationship between sleep and learning have profound implications for education, yet educational systems often operate in ways that undermine optimal sleep. School start times, especially for adolescents, often conflict with developmental sleep needs. Heavy homework loads keep students up late. Academic culture sometimes valorizes all-night study sessions. The result is a population of students who are chronically sleep-deprived precisely at a time when their brains are undergoing intensive learning and development. Research on sleep and academic performance consistently shows that students who get adequate sleep perform better than those who are sleep-deprived, even when controlling for other factors like study time and ability. Sleep is not time stolen from study. It's an essential part of the study process. The student who stops studying at a reasonable hour and gets a full night's sleep will generally learn more effectively than the student who studies several additional hours while exhausted. This has led to calls for educational reform that takes sleep seriously. Some school districts have experimented with later start times for adolescents, recognizing that teenage circadian rhythms naturally shift toward later sleep and wake times. Studies of these schedule changes have shown improvements in attendance, academic performance, mood, and even reductions in car accidents among teenage drivers. These findings suggest that our educational scheduling may have been fighting against biological rhythms, with costs to student well-being and learning. The implications extend beyond formal education. Any learning situation, job training, skill development, creative work, is enhanced by adequate sleep. Corporate cultures that expect long hours and inadequate rest from employees are not just harming health. They're undermining the very productivity and learning they claim to value. Psychologically, understanding sleep's role in learning can transform how we approach acquiring new knowledge and skills. It reframes sleep not as downtime, but as an active learning period. It suggests strategies like spacing learning over multiple days with sleep between sessions, studying before sleep, and prioritizing rest before important tests or performances. It also suggests that when learning feels difficult, sometimes the best strategy is not to push harder, but to sleep and let the brain consolidate. Emotional regulation and sleep. The relationship between sleep and emotion is bidirectional and powerful. Poor sleep leads to emotional dysregulation, while emotional distress disrupts sleep. Understanding this relationship is crucial for psychological health because both sleep and emotional regulation are fundamental to well-being. When sleep-deprived, even mild frustrations can feel overwhelming. Minor annoyances provoke disproportionate reactions. Emotional resilience, the capacity to cope with stress and bounce back from difficulties, diminishes. The world feels more threatening, more irritating, and more exhausting. This emotional reactivity isn't weakness or poor self-control. It's a neurobiological consequence of inadequate sleep. Brain imaging studies reveal why. The amygdala, an almond-shaped structure deep in the brain that processes emotional significance, particularly threat, becomes hyperactive with sleep deprivation. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the brain center for rational thinking, planning, and emotional regulation, shows decreased activity and reduced connectivity with the amygdala. The result is an emotional system running hot, without adequate cognitive control. Psychologically, this means that sleep deprivation creates a double vulnerability. We experience more intense negative emotions and simultaneously have less capacity to regulate those emotions. This combination can turn manageable stressors into overwhelming crises, minor conflicts into major disputes, and passing negative moods into persistent distress. The emotional impact of sleep deprivation includes increased anxiety, greater stress reactivity, reduced positive emotion, and impaired social and emotional perception. Sleep-deprived individuals are worse at reading others' emotional expressions, more likely to interpret neutral expressions as threatening, and less able to empathize with others' perspectives. These social-emotional impairments can create interpersonal difficulties, conflict with partners, misunderstandings with colleagues, impatience with children that add to stress and create a vicious cycle. Conversely, adequate sleep supports emotional regulation in multiple ways. During REM sleep, as discussed earlier, emotional memories are processed, allowing us to retain the learning from emotional experiences while reducing their effective intensity. Sleep also helps reset the amygdala's reactivity, providing a kind of emotional reboot. The prefrontal cortex's regulatory capacities are restored with good sleep, giving us better executive control over emotional responses. This sleep-emotion relationship has important implications for mental health. Virtually every psychological disorder involves some degree of emotional dysregulation, and virtually every psychological disorder is associated with sleep disturbances. While correlation doesn't prove causation, there's growing evidence that the sleep-emotion relationship is causal in both directions. Emotional disorders disrupt sleep, and sleep disruption exacerbates emotional disorders. Sleep and depression, a complex relationship. Depression and sleep disturbance are intimately connected. About 75% of people with depression experience insomnia, difficulty falling or staying asleep. Depression is also associated with early morning awakening, waking up hours before desired, and being unable to return to sleep. Less commonly, depression involves hypersomnia, excessive sleeping, or difficulty waking. These sleep disturbances are not mere symptoms. They're often central to the depressive experience. The relationship between depression and sleep is complex and bidirectional. Depression clearly disrupts sleep. The rumination, negative mood, altered neurotransmitter levels, and circadian dysregulation depression all interfere with normal sleep processes. But sleep disruption also contributes to depression. Insomnia is a significant risk factor for developing depression, and treating sleep problems can sometimes prevent or alleviate depressive episodes. The sleep architecture of depression shows characteristic abnormalities. Depressed individuals often show reduced slow-wave sleep, spending less time in the deep, restorative stages. They may enter REM sleep more quickly than usual and show increased REM density, more eye movements during REM periods. The proportion of REM to non-REM sleep may be altered. These architectural changes suggest that depression involves fundamental dysregulation of sleep systems, not just difficulty falling or staying asleep. From a psychological perspective, the relationship between sleep and depression might be understood through several mechanisms. First, sleep disruption impairs emotional processing that normally occurs during REM sleep. Negative emotions that would typically be processed and integrated instead remain raw and overwhelming. This could contribute to persistent negative mood or depression. Second, insomnia provides hours of quiet darkness with nothing to do but think, a situation that invites rumination in vulnerable individuals. Lying awake at 3 a.m., concerns that might be manageable in daylight can seem insurmountable. This nocturnal rumination can reinforce depressive thought patterns and heighten distress. Third, the cognitive impairments that accompany poor sleep, difficulty concentrating, memory problems, slowed thinking, overlap with symptoms of depression. When sleep-deprived, people may feel they're getting worse, that their depression is deepening, when actually addressing the sleep problem might alleviate some cognitive symptoms. Fourth, chronic sleep deprivation dysregulates stress hormone systems and inflammatory processes, both of which have been implicated in depression. Poor sleep creates a physiological state that may be more vulnerable to depressive symptoms. Interestingly, acute sleep deprivation, staying awake for an entire night, can sometimes produce a rapid but temporary improvement in depression. This counterintuitive finding has led to therapeutic exploration of sleep restriction and sleep phase advance as treatments for depression. These approaches deliberately manipulate sleep timing to influence mood, suggesting that the sleep-mood relationship is even more complex than simple more sleep is better. Treatment implications are significant. Addressing sleep problems in depression is not optional or secondary. It's essential. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia (CBTI) has been shown effective for improving both sleep and mood in depressed individuals. Some evidence suggests that treating sleep problems early might prevent the development of depression in at-risk individuals. Antidepressant medications often have sedating or alerting properties, specifically because addressing sleep is part of treating depression. Psychologically, helping depressed individuals understand the sleep-mood connection can provide hope and direction. Rather than viewing their sleep problems as additional failures or symptoms, they can understand them as treatable factors that, when addressed, will help their overall recovery. This reframing can combat the helplessness that characterizes depression, sleep and anxiety, hyperarousal, and the inability to let go. While depression often involves too little arousal and too much sleep need, even if sleep is non-restorative, anxiety involves too much arousal, making it difficult to fall or stay asleep. Anxiety and insomnia are closely linked, with each exacerbating the other in a mutually reinforcing cycle. The core problem in anxiety-related sleep difficulties is hyperarousal, a state of heightened physiological and psychological activation. The anxious person's nervous system remains on high alert even when it should be winding down for sleep. Heart rate stays elevated, muscles remain tense, stress hormones circulate, and crucially, the mind remains vigilantly active, scanning for threats and ruminating on worries. Psychologically, falling asleep requires a kind of trust and surrender that anxiety makes difficult. Sleep is a vulnerable state. We lose consciousness, lose control, become unaware of our environment. For anxious individuals who feel they must maintain vigilance, who believe that terrible things will happen if they let their guard down, this surrender feels dangerous. The act of trying to sleep can itself become anxiety-provoking, creating a paradox where the effort to sleep prevents sleep. This paradox is central to many anxiety-related sleep problems. The harder someone tries to fall asleep, the more anxious they become about not falling asleep, which increases arousal, which makes sleep even less likely. Try and control sleep, an essentially involuntary process, creates a kind of psychological thrashing that perpetuates wakefulness. The cognitive patterns of anxiety also directly interfere with sleep. Worry and rumination, hallmarks of anxiety, are incompatible with the mental quieting that sleep requires. The anxious mind at bedtime becomes hyperactive, running through endless what-if scenarios, planning for unlikely contingencies, or ruminating on past events. This mental activity maintains arousal and prevents the descent into sleep. Performance anxiety specifically about sleep can develop, where the bed becomes associated with struggle and frustration rather than rest. People may find they can fall asleep easily on the couch but struggle when they go to their bed, or that they sleep better when they don't care about getting enough sleep, like on vacation, than when sleep feels important. This performance anxiety about sleep is itself a form of insomnia and requires treatment approaches that paradoxically involve caring less about sleep, not more. Anxiety disorders show characteristic sleep disruptions. Generalized anxiety disorder is associated with difficulty falling asleep and restless, unrefreshing sleep. Panic disorder can involve nocturnal panic attacks, sudden episodes of intense fear during sleep, accompanied by physical symptoms like rapid heartbeat, sweating, and breathlessness. These nocturnal panics typically occur during the transition from light to deep sleep and can make sufferers afraid to fall asleep, creating severe insomnia. Post-traumatic stress disorder, as mentioned earlier, is characterized by nightmares and fragmented sleep. PTSD involves a chronic hypervigilant state, where the nervous system remains on high alert for threats. During sleep, this vigilance manifests as easily disrupted sleep, nightmares, and a failure to achieve the deep, restorative sleep stages. The result is that trauma survivors often feel they cannot rest even when they sleep, and exhaustion compounds the challenges of recovery. Treatment for anxiety-related sleep problems involves addressing both the anxiety and the sleep difficulty. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBDI, has been adapted for anxious insomnia and addresses the specific cognitive patterns that maintain the problem: catastrophic thinking about sleep, performance anxiety, safety behaviors that actually perpetuate insomnia. Relaxation training, mindfulness meditation, and breathing exercises can help reduce the physiological arousal that interferes with sleep. Importantly, addressing sleep and anxiety treatment isn't just about improving sleep. It's about treating the anxiety itself. When anxious individuals begin sleeping better, their anxiety often improves substantially. The cognitive clarity, emotional regulation, and reduced stress reactivity that come with good sleep make anxiety more manageable. Conversely, letting sleep problems persist can make anxiety treatment less effective. From a psychological perspective, learning to sleep well when anxious involves developing a different relationship with control and uncertainty. It requires accepting that sleep cannot be forced, that some nights will be better than others, that catastrophic consequences won't actually follow from poor sleep, and that safety comes not from vigilant control, but from adaptive coping. These lessons extend beyond sleep to anxiety management more generally. Sleep-dependent insight and creative problem-solving. One of the most fascinating psychological functions of sleep is its role in creativity and insight. History is full of anecdotes about important discoveries, inventions, and creative works that emerge from dreams or arrive suddenly upon waking. While some of these stories are apocryphal or exaggerated, there is substantial scientific evidence that sleep genuinely enhances creative thinking and problem-solving. The chemist August Kekulé famously claimed that the structure of the benzene molecule came to him in a dream of a snake biting its own tail, suggesting the ring structure that solved a major chemical puzzle. The inventor Elias, how reportedly dreamed of spears with eye-shaped holes near their points, leading to his insight about placing the eye of a needle at the pointed end rather than the top, which made the sewing machine possible. Artists, musicians, and writers have long recognized that creative solutions often arrive after sleeping on a problem, Scientific research supports these anecdotes. Studies have shown that sleep, particularly REM sleep, enhances performance on creative problem-solving tasks. In one classic experiment, participants worked on puzzles that could be solved through a hidden shortcut rule. Those who slept before attempting the puzzles again were much more likely to discover the shortcut than those who stayed awake, suggesting that sleep facilitated insight into the underlying structure of the problem. Why does sleep enhance creativity? Several mechanisms appear to be involved. First, during sleep, particularly during REM sleep, the brain shows a pattern of connectivity different from waking. The strict, logical, focused thinking of wakefulness gives way to more diffuse, associative thinking. Distant concepts become connected, rigid mental sets loosen, and novel combinations emerge. This is why dreams are so often bizarre. The brain is making connections it wouldn't make during waking thought. Second, sleep appears to facilitate what's called memory abstraction or schema extraction. Rather than just remembering specific details, the sleeping brain extracts patterns, rules, and general principles from experience. This extraction of underlying structure is central to creative insight, seeing the pattern that connects seemingly disparate elements, recognizing the essential principle beneath superficial differences. Third, sleep provides a break from actively thinking about a problem, which paradoxically can facilitate solution. When we consciously work on a difficult problem, we often become fixated on particular approaches or assumptions. Sleep provides a true break, unlike other wakeful diversions, which still involve some level of conscious processing, allowing the mind to approach the problem freshly upon waking. Fourth, the emotional processing that occurs during REM sleep may help reduce anxiety or frustration about a problem, allowing for a more open, exploratory approach. When we're frustrated and stuck, we often think more rigidly, which perpetuates being stuck. The emotional reset of sleep can restore a sense of possibility and playfulness conducive to creative thinking. From a psychological perspective, this sleep-creativity connection has important practical implications. Creative workers, artists, scientists, writers, designers, entrepreneurs, benefit from prioritizing sleep rather than sacrificing it for extra working hours. The quality of creative thinking is more important than quantity of time spent, and sleep is crucial for quality. Organizations and cultures that value creativity should also value sleep. The tech industry's historical glorification of all-night coding sessions and the broader cultural badge of honor around sleep deprivation are not just harmful to health, they're counterproductive for the very innovation they claim to seek. Creativity requires a well-rested brain. For individuals facing creative challenges, this research suggests strategic use of sleep. Working on a problem before bed allows the sleeping brain to process it. Keeping a dream journal by the bedside captures insights that might arise during dreams or in the hypnopompic state. The groggy transition from sleep to waking, which, like hypnagogia, can be creatively rich. Recognizing that feeling stuck might signal a need for sleep rather than for more hours of frustrated effort can be liberating. Incubation and unconscious processing. Related to sleep's role in creativity is the broader phenomenon of incubation, the finding that taking a break from a problem often leads to solution. You've probably experienced this, struggling with a problem, putting it aside, and then suddenly seeing the solution while doing something unrelated like showering or walking. Incubation has been studied extensively in creativity research, and sleep appears to be a particularly effective incubation period. While waking breaks help, especially if they involve activities unrelated to the problem, sleep produces stronger incubation effects. This suggests that incubation involves more than just forgetting misleading approaches. It involves active unconscious processing that is enhanced during sleep. The psychological concept of the unconscious or subconscious mind, processing that occurs outside awareness, is central to understanding incubation. While we're not consciously working on a problem during sleep, our brains continue processing information, making connections and exploring solution space. This unconscious processing can be more creative precisely because it's not constrained by conscious assumptions and mental sets. From a depth psychology perspective, this unconscious creativity is not a mere cognitive trick, but rather reflects a profound intelligence of the unconscious mind. Jung spoke of the unconscious as not just a repository of repressed content, but as a source of wisdom and creativity that exceeds conscious ego capacities. Accessing this unconscious wisdom requires learning to trust processes that occur outside conscious awareness and control, a trust that sleep facilitates. Practically, respecting unconscious processing means resisting compulsion to force solutions through prolonged conscious effort. It means building regular breaks and adequate sleep into creative work. It means recognizing that seemingly unproductive time, daydreaming, walking, sleeping, is actually essential to creative process. This perspective challenges productivity culture's emphasis on constant active effort. The best creative work often involves a rhythm of intense focused effort alternating with rest and incubation. Sleep is not time away from creative work. It's an essential phase of that work. The struggle to sleep. Insomnia, defined as difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking too early with inability to return to sleep, is the most common sleep disorder. When these sleep difficulties occur frequently, typically 3 or more nights per week, and cause daytime impairment or distress, insomnia becomes clinically significant. The psychological impact of chronic insomnia extends far beyond tiredness. Insomniacs often describe feeling disconnected from life, as if watching through a fog. Cognitive functioning suffers. Concentration, memory, decision-making all become harder. Mood deteriorates, with increased irritability, anxiety, and depression. Social relationships strain as the insomniac becomes isolated, irritable, or dependent on others' understanding. Work performance declines. The sense of helplessness and frustration around sleep can generalize into broader feelings of powerlessness. Psychologically, insomnia often involves a complex interaction of predisposing factors, genetics, personality traits like perfectionism or tendency to worry, precipitating factors, stressful life events, illness, schedule changes, and perpetuating factors, behaviors and thoughts that maintain the insomnia even after initial triggers have resolved. Understanding these factors is crucial because chronic insomnia is often maintained by the very strategies people use trying to cope with it. Common perpetuating factors include irregular sleep schedules, go to bed at varying times, sleeping in on weekends, excessive time in bed, staying in bed hoping to catch up on sleep, which actually weakens the bed-sleep association, compensatory daytime napping, which reduces sleep drive at night, and problematic beliefs about sleep catastrophizing about consequences of poor sleep, unrealistic expectations about sleep needs, misattributing daytime problems to sleep rather than other factors. Psychologically, insomnia often involves performance anxiety, specifically about sleep. The bed becomes associated with frustration and struggle rather than rest. Bedtime becomes anxiety-provoking. Checking the clock during the night triggers calculations about how much sleep is being lost, which increases arousal, which makes sleep even less likely. Trying hard to sleep, a logical response to problem, paradoxically makes sleep less likely because sleep must be allowed rather than forced. Cognitive patterns play a central role in perpetuating insomnia. Catastrophic thinking about consequences of poor sleep. I'll fail tomorrow. My health will be ruined. I can't function without 8 hours. Increases anxiety, which increases arousal, which prevents sleep. Attentional bias towards sleep-related cues makes insomniacs hypervigilant about anything that might affect sleep, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Unhelpful beliefs about sleep control. I must make myself sleep. If I can't sleep naturally, something is deeply wrong. Creates struggle against the natural process of falling asleep. Treatment for chronic insomnia has evolved significantly. While sleeping medications can provide short-term relief, they don't address the perpetuating psychological factors and can create dependence and tolerance issues. The gold standard treatment is now cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI, a structured, evidence-based psychological approach. CBTI typically involves several components. Stimulus control aims to strengthen the bed-sleep association by using the bed only for sleep and sex, not for reading, watching TV, worrying, getting out of bed when unable to sleep, and going to bed only when sleepy. Sleep restriction paradoxically involves initially limiting time in bed to match actual sleep time, which increases sleep drive and consolidates sleep, then gradually expanding time in bed as sleep improves. Cognitive restructuring addresses unhelpful beliefs and catastrophic thinking about sleep. Patients learn to reality test beliefs. Is it really true that one bad night will ruin everything? Develop more flexible thinking. I prefer good sleep, but I can cope with less, and reduce performance anxiety. Sleep will come when I stop trying to force it. Sleep hygiene education provides information about environmental and lifestyle factors that influence sleep: regular schedule, dark and cool bedroom, avoiding stimulants before bed, managing light exposure. While sleep hygiene alone rarely cures insomnia, it supports the other behavioral and cognitive changes. Relaxation training, progressive muscle relaxation, breathing exercises, imagery, mindfulness meditation, helps reduce the physiological arousal that maintains insomnia. These techniques are not about forcing sleep, but about creating conditions conducive to sleep by reducing arousal. CBTI has impressive efficacy, with 70-80% of patients showing significant improvement. The effects are durable, lasting years after treatment ends. This success demonstrates that insomnia, while distressing, is a treatable condition, that the psychological factors maintaining it can be changed. From a broader psychological perspective, overcoming insomnia often involves a fundamental shift in relationship with sleep. Rather than viewing sleep as something to control, force, or achieve through effort, successful sleepers develop an attitude of allowing, trusting, and letting go. This shift from effortful control to relaxed permission reflects psychological principles that extend beyond sleep. The recognition that some things in life are improved not through increased effort, but through decreased struggle. Sleep apnea, when sleep becomes dangerous. Sleep apnea, particularly obstructive sleep apnea, OSA, is a sleep disorder in which breathing repeatedly stops and starts during sleep. While primarily a medical condition involving anatomical and physiological factors, sleep apnea has profound psychological consequences that are often underappreciated. In obstructive sleep apnea, the airway becomes blocked during sleep, preventing breathing. Oxygen levels drop, carbon dioxide accumulates, and the brain briefly rouses the sleeper to restore breathing. These arousals are usually too brief to be consciously remembered, but they fragment sleep profoundly. Severe sleep apnea can involve hundreds of these breathing interruptions per night, preventing the sufferer from ever achieving deep, restorative sleep. The psychological consequences are severe. The most obvious is extreme daytime sleepiness. People with untreated sleep apnea may fall asleep at inappropriate times, including while driving, which creates serious safety risks. But beyond sleepiness, the chronic sleep deprivation of sleep apnea creates cognitive impairment, mood disturbance, irritability, and reduced quality of life. Depression is common in sleep apnea patients. The relationship appears to be bidirectional. Depression can worsen sleep apnea through various mechanisms, while untreated sleep apnea clearly contributes to depressive symptoms. Treating sleep apnea often leads to improvement in mood, sometimes dramatically, suggesting that what appeared to be primary depression was actually significantly driven by the sleep disorder. Anxiety is also prevalent among sleep apnea patients. Some individuals experience panic attacks during apnea episodes, waking gasping and terrified. Even without panic attacks, The chronic physiological stress of repeated oxygen deprivation creates a state of heightened arousal that can manifest as anxiety. Partners of sleep apnea patients also often develop anxiety, terrified by watching their loved ones stop breathing repeatedly during the night. Cognitive impairment from sleep apnea can be severe enough to mimic dementia, particularly in older adults. Memory problems, difficulty concentrating, slowed processing speed, and executive function deficits all result from chronic sleep fragmentation. Tragically, some individuals with sleep apnea have been misdiagnosed with cognitive disorders when their problems would have been treatable through addressing the sleep apnea. Psychologically, sleep apnea creates a profound sense of never being rested no matter how much time is spent sleeping. Sufferers may feel confused about why they're so exhausted despite spending 8 or 9 hours in bed each night. They may blame themselves for laziness or lack of motivation, when in fact they have a medical condition preventing restorative sleep. The gold standard treatment for moderate to severe sleep apnea is continuous positive airway pressure, CPAP, a device that delivers pressurized air through a mask to keep the airway open during sleep. While highly effective when used correctly, CPAP compliance is a significant challenge with psychological dimensions. Many patients find the mask uncomfortable, claustrophobic, or embarrassing. The device can affect intimacy and sexual relationships. Initial adjustment difficulties lead many to abandon treatment. Supporting CPAP adherence often requires addressing psychological barriers. Psychoeducation about the serious health consequences of untreated sleep apnea can increase motivation. Cognitive behavioral approaches can address anxiety about wearing the mask. Partner involvement can normalize the treatment and address relationship concerns. Gradual desensitization can help with claustrophobia. Recognizing that the initial discomfort yields to dramatic improvements in energy, mood, and cognitive function helps patients persist through the adjustment period. For individuals with mild sleep apnea or those unable to tolerate CPAP, other treatments include positional therapy, avoiding back sleeping, oral appliances, weight loss, as obesity is a major risk factor, and in some cases, surgery. From a psychological perspective, successfully treating sleep apnea often results in transformation. Patients describe feeling like themselves again, recovering energy and clarity they didn't realize they'd lost. Narcolepsy and excessive daytime sleepiness. Narcolepsy is a neurological sleep disorder characterized by excessive daytime sleepiness and, in many cases, sudden loss of muscle tone cataplexy, triggered by strong emotions. While less common than insomnia or sleep apnea, narcolepsy has distinctive psychological challenges. The core symptom is overwhelming sleepiness during the day, with individuals feeling constantly drowsy and experiencing irresistible sleep attacks, suddenly falling asleep even in engaging or active situations. These sleep attacks can occur while eating, talking, working, or driving, creating safety risks and significant life disruption. Cataplexy, present in about 70% of narcolepsy patients, is particularly striking. Strong emotions, usually positive emotions like laughter, surprise, or excitement, trigger sudden muscle weakness or paralysis while the person remains conscious. In mild episodes, this might involve slight sagging of facial muscles or dropping an object. In severe episodes, the person may completely collapse to the ground. Psychologically, cataplexy creates a cruel dilemma. Positive emotions become dangerous, leading some individuals to suppress joy, laughter, and excitement to avoid attacks. Narcolepsy also often involves sleep paralysis, temporary inability to move or speak while falling asleep or waking up, and hypnagogic hallucinations, vivid, often frightening perceptual experiences during sleep-wake transitions. These symptoms result from REM sleep intruding into wakefulness, creating hybrid states where components of REM, paralysis, dreaming occur while partially awake. The psychological impact of narcolepsy is profound. The chronic sleepiness creates cognitive fog, memory problems, and difficulty maintaining attention. Academic and work performance suffer. The unpredictability of sleep attacks creates anxiety and social embarrassment. Relationships are strained when partners must accommodate symptoms, or when cataplexy is triggered by intimate moments. Depression is common, partly reactive to the limitations the condition imposes, and partly related to neurochemical changes in narcolepsy. Social misunderstanding compounds psychological distress. Before diagnosis, individuals with narcolepsy are often accused of laziness, lack of motivation, or substance use. The reality that they have a neurological disorder causing involuntary sleepiness is invisible and hard for others to understand. Even after diagnosis, stigma persists, as people may not appreciate that narcolepsy is a real medical condition requiring accommodation. Treatment for narcolepsy typically involves medications that promote wakefulness and, for those with cataplexy, medications that suppress REM sleep. Scheduled naps strategically placed during the day can also help manage sleepiness. Psychological support is crucial, helping patients grieve the loss of normal sleep, develop coping strategies, advocate for necessary accommodations at work or school, and maintain relationships despite the condition's challenges. From a psychological perspective, living with narcolepsy requires developing expertise about one's own patterns, recognizing warning signs of impending sleep, identifying situations that trigger cataplexy, structuring life to accommodate necessary naps, and communicating needs to others. This self-knowledge and self-advocacy are forms of psychological resilience essential for managing chronic conditions. Development of sleep architecture. The psychology of sleep begins before birth. Fetuses show sleep-wake cycles in the womb, with REM-like sleep observable in the third trimester. At birth, newborns sleep 16 to 18 hours per day, though distributed across many short sleep bouts rather than a single long nocturnal period. This polyphasic sleep pattern gradually consolidates into a monophasic pattern over the first year of life. The sleep architecture of infants differs dramatically from adults. Newborns spend about 50% of sleep time in REM sleep, compared to 20 to 25% in adults, suggesting that REM sleep serves important developmental functions beyond its role in mature brains. This REM abundance may support rapid brain development, as the neural activity of REM sleep appears to stimulate brain maturation and connectivity. The psychological significance of infant sleep extends beyond the infant to affect the entire family system. Parental sleep is profoundly disrupted by infant care, with mothers typically sleeping 1 to 2 hours less per night in the first 3 months postpartum. This sleep deprivation affects maternal mood, with increased risk of postpartum depression and constrained couple relationships. Supporting new parents' sleep through partner involvement, social support, and realistic expectations is crucial for family well-being. Infant sleep is also a source of significant parental anxiety and cultural controversy. Questions about where babies should sleep, bed sharing versus crib, how to respond to nighttime waking, immediate response versus cry-out methods, and when babies should sleep through the night carry emotional weight and often conflicting advice. Psychologically, these debates reflect deeper concerns about attachment, independence, and parenting values. Research on attachment theory and infant sleep suggests that responsive nighttime parenting, attending to infants' needs during the night, supports secure attachment and does not create long-term sleep problems despite common warnings. Conversely, harsh or unresponsive nighttime care may increase infant distress and potentially affect attachment security. However, parental well-being also matters. Parents who are exhausted and desperate may need different approaches than well-supported, adequately rested parents. As children grow, sleep patterns and needs evolve. Toddlers typically need 11 to 14 hours of sleep, including naps, though individual variation is large. Preschoolers need 10 to 13 hours, and school-age children need 9 to 12 hours. These recommendations exceed what many children actually get, particularly as screen time, scheduled activities, and homework intrude on sleep time. Sleep serves crucial developmental functions throughout childhood. It supports physical growth through growth hormone release during deep sleep. It consolidates the immense learning that occurs during childhood. It regulates emotion and behavior. Sleep-deprived children show increased irritability, hyperactivity, impulsiveness, and emotional dysregulation. The connection between insufficient sleep and attention and behavior problems is strong enough that some children diagnosed with ADHD may actually have sleep problems as a primary issue. Psychologically, establishing healthy sleep habits in childhood creates patterns that can persist into adulthood. Children who learn good sleep hygiene, who associate bed with comfort and rest, and who develop regular routines are more likely to sleep well throughout life. Conversely, childhood sleep problems, particularly if chronic and untreated, can set the stage for lifelong sleep difficulties. Common childhood sleep problems include behavioral insomnia, difficulty falling asleep without parental presence, frequent nighttime waking requiring parental intervention, nightmares and night terrors, sleepwalking and sleep-talking, and anxiety-related sleep difficulties. Most of these resolve with development, though some require intervention. Psychologically, addressing childhood sleep problems involves balancing children's needs for comfort and security with the development of independent sleep skills. Adolescent sleep, the perfect storm of biological and social forces. Adolescence represents a unique collision of biological sleep changes with social and educational demands that work against those changes. The result is widespread sleep deprivation among teenagers with significant psychological consequences. Biologically, puberty triggers a shift in circadian rhythm. Adolescents experience a natural delay in melatonin release. They don't start feeling sleepy until later at night than they did as children or will as adults. This delay of 1 to 2 hours means that a teenager who fell asleep easily at 9 p.m. as a child now may not feel sleepy until 11 p.m. or midnight. This is not choice or poor discipline. It's biology. However, school start times, often beginning at 7:30 a.m. or earlier, require early waking that conflicts with this delayed sleep phase. The adolescent who falls asleep at 11 p.m. or midnight but must wake at 6 a.m. is losing hours of needed sleep. Adolescents need 8 to 10 hours of sleep, but many get significantly less, particularly on school nights. This chronic sleep debt accumulates across the week, with teenagers attempting to catch up on weekends through extreme sleep-in periods. The psychological consequences of adolescent sleep deprivation are extensive. Academic performance suffers. Sleep-deprived teens have lower grades, worse test performance, and more difficulty learning new material. Emotional regulation deteriorates, contributing to the moodiness stereotypically associated with adolescence, though certainly not all teenage mood changes are sleep-related. Risk-taking increases, as the prefrontal cortex's inhibitory control is undermined by sleep deprivation. Depression and anxiety are more common among sleep-deprived adolescents. Particularly concerning is the relationship between inadequate sleep and adolescent suicide risk. Multiple studies have found that adolescents who sleep less than 6 hours per night have significantly elevated suicide risk even after controlling for depression. Whether sleep deprivation directly contributes to suicidal thinking or simply serves as a marker of distress, ensuring adequate adolescent sleep appears to be a suicide prevention issue. Adolescent sleep is also affected by technology use. Smartphones, tablets, computers, and other screens emit blue light that suppresses melatonin and delays sleep. More importantly, the engaging content on these devices, social media, games, videos, stimulates the mind when it should be winding down. Texting and social media use can continue late into the night, directly reducing sleep time while creating anxiety about social dynamics. The psychology of adolescent sleep intersects with identity development and autonomy. Bedtime becomes a site of potential conflict between parents seeking to enforce healthy sleep and adolescents asserting independence. Staying up late can feel like adult freedom, while earlier bedtimes feel like childhood restrictions. Navigating this requires balancing adolescent autonomy with guidance toward healthy habits. Some school districts have addressed adolescent sleep deprivation by delaying school start times. Research on these changes has shown remarkable benefits: improved attendance, higher grades, fewer car accidents among teen drivers, improved mood, and reduced health center visits for fatigue-related complaints. These findings suggest that much teenage laziness is actually biological sleep need conflicting with social schedules. From a psychological and public health perspective, adolescent sleep deprivation represent a modifiable risk factor for numerous problems: academic difficulties, mental health issues, accidents, and risk-taking. Addressing it requires multi-level intervention, individual education about sleep importance, family support for healthy sleep habits, school policy changes to allow adequate sleep, and cultural shifts away from celebrating adolescent sleep deprivation. Adult sleep, stability, stressors, and individual variation. Adulthood represents a period of relative sleep stability, though stability doesn't mean uniformity or absence of problems. Adult sleep needs are typically 7 to 9 hours per night, with significant individual variation. Some adults genuinely need only 6 to 7 hours, while others require 9 to 10. Understanding one's own needs rather than forcing conformity to average recommendations is psychologically important. Adult sleep is profoundly affected by life circumstances and stressors. Work demands, particularly shift work or jobs requiring on-call availability, disrupt sleep. Parenthood, especially of young children, fragments sleep. Financial stress, relationship conflicts, health concerns, and major life transitions all affect sleep quality. The bidirectional relationship between stress and sleep means that these life challenges both cause poor sleep and are made worse by poor sleep, creating potential vicious cycles. Psychologically, how adults cope with sleep disruption varies widely. Some are resilient, able to function reasonably well with less than optimal sleep, and to recover quickly when sleep improves. Others are more vulnerable, with sleep disruption quickly affecting mood, functioning, and health. Understanding one's own vulnerability or resilience can guide decisions about lifestyle, career, and when to seek help for sleep problems. Adult sleep also reflects an affect relationship dynamics. Couples must negotiate shared sleep space, differing sleep preferences and schedules, and how to handle one partner's sleep problems. Sleep divorced. Couples sleeping in separate rooms to accommodate different sleep needs or problems is increasingly common and can improve both sleep and relationship satisfaction when approached collaboratively rather than as failure. The assumption that couples must share a bed to have a healthy relationship is cultural rather than universal. Shift work deserves special attention because of its profound impact on sleep and psychology. Working nights or rotating shifts forces people to sleep during the day, fighting against circadian biology. Even with dark curtains and quiet environments, daytime sleep is typically shorter and less restorative than nighttime sleep. The result is chronic sleep deprivation, affecting approximately 20% of the workforce in developed countries. The psychological toll of shift work includes increased rates of depression, anxiety, and burnout. Cognitive performance declines, creating safety risks in industries where shift work is common: healthcare, transportation, manufacturing, emergency services. Relationship strain when one partner's schedule is out of sync with the rest of the family. Long-term shift work is associated with increased health risks, including cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, and possibly some cancers. From a psychological perspective, shift workers must develop expertise in managing their unique sleep challenges. This includes strategic napping, light management, bright light exposure during work hours, darkness during sleep time, careful timing of caffeine, and communication with family about schedule needs. However, individual strategies can only partly compensate for the fundamental biological challenge of sleeping against circadian rhythms. Organizational and policy changes, limiting consecutive night shifts, providing adequate recovery time, designing schedules that minimize circadian disruption are necessary to protect shift workers' health. Pregnancy represents a special adult sleep challenge, particularly in the third trimester when physical discomfort, frequent urination, fetal movement, and anxiety about impending parenthood all disrupt sleep. Postpartum sleep deprivation has already been mentioned regarding infants, but mother's sleep often remains disrupted for months or years after birth, particularly if there are multiple children or if the mother is breastfeeding on demand. Menopause brings new sleep challenges for women, with hot flashes and night sweats disrupting sleep, along with hormonal changes that can affect sleep architecture. The prevalence of insomnia increases significantly around menopause, and sleep problems can compound other menopausal symptoms like mood changes and cognitive difficulties. Throughout adulthood, psychological well-being and sleep remain intimately connected. Adults who prioritize sleep, who recognize its importance and protect time for it, generally function better psychologically than those who sacrifice sleep for work, socializing, or entertainment. The cultural message that sleep is unproductive or that sleeping less demonstrates commitment or toughness creates pressure to deprioritize sleep despite clear evidence of its importance. Aging in sleep, changes in later life. As we age, sleep changes in predictable ways. Older adults often experience earlier bedtimes and wake times, phase advancement, lighter sleep with more awakenings, less deep sleep, and more time awake during the night. They may spend more time in bed to obtain adequate rest. These changes begin in midlife and continue through later adulthood. Psychologically, age-related sleep changes can be distressing. Older adults may remember sleeping more soundly in youth and interpret current sleep as problematic when it's actually developmentally normal. The expectation of sleeping straight through the night without waking may become unrealistic, and rigidly maintaining that expectation can create anxiety that worsens sleep. However, not all sleep difficulties in older adults are normal aging. Sleep disorders, particularly sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, and insomnia become more common with age but should not be dismissed as inevitable. Medical conditions have become more prevalent with age: chronic pain, heart disease, respiratory disease, neurological conditions also disrupt sleep, as do many medications commonly prescribed to older adults. The distinction between normal aging-related sleep changes and pathological sleep problems is psychologically important. Normalizing what is indeed developmentally typical can reduce anxiety and help older adults adapt. But dismissing genuine sleep disorders as just aging leads to undertreatment of problems that can be addressed, reducing quality of life unnecessarily. Cognitively, the relationship between sleep and aging is complex. Poor sleep in older adults is associated with cognitive decline, including increased risk of dementia. Whether poor sleep causes cognitive decline, results from the brain changes of dementia, or both affects each other bidirectionally is still being researched. Recent evidence suggests that adequate sleep throughout life, including in later adulthood, may be protective against cognitive decline, though not completely preventive. Depression in older adults is strongly associated with sleep disturbance. The relationship is bidirectional, as in younger adults, but the picture is complicated by medical illness, medication effects, and social factors like bereavement and isolation that are more common in later life. Treating sleep problems in depressed older adults can significantly improve mood and quality of life. Social and environmental factors profoundly affect older adults' sleep. Retirement can improve sleep by allowing more flexible schedules, or worsen it by removing the structure and purpose that work provided. Loss of a partner after decades of shared sleep can disrupt sleep through grief, loneliness, and simply the absence of another person's sleep-related sounds and movements. Moving to assisted living or nursing home settings often worsens sleep through noise, light, lack of privacy, and institutional schedules. Psychologically, addressing sleep in older adults requires a comprehensive approach. Medical evaluation can identify treatable sleep disorders or medical conditions affecting sleep. Medication review can minimize drugs that interfere with sleep. Cognitive behavioral approaches can address insomnia and anxiety about sleep. Environmental modifications can optimize the sleep environment. Social support can address loneliness and provide structure. Most importantly, validating older adult sleep experiences while also offering hope for improvement strikes a balance between normalization and treatment nihilism. Yes, sleep changes with age, but no, you don't have to suffer with terrible sleep just because you're older. Quality sleep remains possible throughout life and continues to be important for well-being, cognitive function, and quality of life in later adulthood. Cultural variations in sleep patterns and beliefs. While sleep is a universal human need, the specifics of how, when, where, and with whom we sleep vary dramatically across cultures. These variations reveal that much of what we consider normal about sleep is cultural construction rather than biological necessity. In Western, particularly English-speaking cultures, the dominant pattern is consolidated nocturnal sleep in a private space, usually alone or with a romantic partner. Children are typically expected to sleep independently from an early age, and infants sleeping in their own rooms is often considered ideal. This pattern is so normative that deviation from it, adults napping during the day, children co-sleeping with parents beyond infancy, or unconventional sleep schedules, may be viewed as problematic. However, this pattern is historically recent and culturally specific. Throughout most of human history and in many contemporary non-Western cultures, sleep patterns differ substantially. Biphasic sleep, 2 distinct sleep periods per day, was common in pre-industrial Europe, with people sleeping in first sleep and second sleep with a period of wakefulness between. In many cultures today, midday napping siesta is normative, reflecting adaptation to climate and creating a biphasic sleep pattern. Co-sleeping, children sleeping with or near parents, is the norm in many cultures, particularly in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. From these cultural perspectives, the Western practice of expecting infants and young children to sleep alone is seen as strange or even cruel. Psychological research on co-sleeping finds that it can support attachment and doesn't necessarily create dependence or sleep problems, challenging Western anxieties about the practice. Cultural beliefs about dreams and their significance vary dramatically. Some cultures view dreams as meaningless brain activity, while others see them as spiritually significant, as messages from ancestors or deities, as prophetic visions, or as travels of the soul in other realms. These beliefs shape whether and how people attend to dreams. In cultures that value dreams highly, elaborate systems of dream interpretation guide behavior and decision-making. Sleep timing also shows cultural variation. Some cultures emphasize early rising as virtuous, early to bed, early to rise, while others have more flexible attitudes. Work and social schedules vary, with some cultures having late dinners and social activities that would prevent early sleep in other cultures. These patterns shape individual circadian rhythms through social entrainment. Psychologically, cultural context shapes sleep expectations and experiences. When individual sleep patterns don't match cultural norms, individuals may experience distress, not because the pattern is objectively problematic, but because of the misfit between person and culture. Someone who naturally has a delayed sleep phase prefers late sleep and late waking. Living in a culture that valorizes early rising will face more challenges than the same person in a culture with more flexible timing norms. Cultural factors also influence willingness to seek help for sleep problems, and what treatments are acceptable. Western approaches emphasizing individual behavior change may be less effective or acceptable in cultures with more collectivist values. Medication approaches common in some cultures may be rejected in cultures favoring natural or spiritual remedies. Understanding cultural variation in sleep helps us recognize that our own sleep patterns and beliefs are not universal or necessary. It creates space for individuals to find sleep patterns that work for them rather than forcing conformity to cultural norms. It also reminds us that sleep, while biological, is always embedded in social and cultural contexts that shape its expression. Modern society's war on sleep. Contemporary industrial and post-industrial society has created conditions that are, in many ways, hostile to healthy sleep. The result is a population that is chronically sleep-deprived, with significant costs to health, safety, productivity, and psychological well-being. Electric lighting, perhaps the most significant technological change affecting sleep, allows us to remain active long after sunset. While this provides obvious benefits, it also disrupts the natural relationship between light and sleep that regulated human sleep for millennia. We can now work, socialize, and entertain ourselves 24 hours a day, and our biology struggles to keep up. The 24/7 economy means that commercial activity, entertainment, and many services never stop. Restaurants, stores, gyms, and entertainment venues stay open late or all night. This creates social pressure to stay active later and schedule flexibility that, paradoxically, can make regular sleep schedules harder to maintain. Digital technology represents a particular challenge. Smartphones, tablets, computers, and televisions emit blue wavelength light that suppresses melatonin and delays sleep onset. But beyond the light itself, these devices provide engaging, stimulating content that keeps minds active when they should be winding down. The intermittent reinforcement of checking email, social media, news, or messages creates compulsive behavior that extends into hours that should be dedicated to sleep. Work culture in many industries glorifies overwork and implicitly or explicitly devalues sleep. The person who answers emails at midnight and starts work at 6 a.m. is seen as dedicated and committed. Sleep is viewed as unproductive, as something high achievers sacrifice. This cultural narrative ignores the clear evidence that sleep deprivation reduces productivity, creativity, decision-making, and health, that sacrificing sleep is counterproductive even by purely economic measures. The result is epidemic sleep deprivation. Studies suggest that 35 to 40% of adults in developed countries don't get recommended sleep amounts. Among adolescents, the proportion is even higher. This chronic sleep debt has been called a public health crisis by some researchers. The consequences are far-reaching. Drowsy driving causes hundreds of thousands of accidents annually. Workplace accidents increase with sleep deprivation. Medical errors are more common when doctors and nurses are exhausted. School performance suffers when students are sleep-deprived. Mental health problems are exacerbated by inadequate sleep. Chronic diseases like obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease are more common in those with chronic sleep deprivation. Psychologically, the collective sleep deprivation of modern society may contribute to the epidemic of anxiety and depression, the widespread sense of being overwhelmed, and the epidemic of burnout in many professions. While many factors contribute to these problems, asking entire populations to function on inadequate sleep is asking for psychological distress. There is a growing counter-movement recognizing sleep's importance. Some companies are implementing policies supporting employee sleep, limiting after-hours email expectations, providing nap spaces, educating about sleep importance. Some schools are delaying start times. There's increasing public health messaging about sleep as a pillar of health alongside nutrition and exercise. From a psychological perspective, reclaiming sleep requires individual, organizational, and cultural change. Individually, People must prioritize sleep despite cultural messages telling them not to. Organizations must create policies and cultures that support rather than undermine sleep. And culturally, we need a shift in how sleep is valued, seeing it not as weakness or unproductive time, but as essential to human flourishing. The economics and politics of sleep. Sleep is not merely a personal or medical issue. It's also an economic and political one. Who gets to sleep well, and who doesn't breaks down along lines of class, race, and power in ways that reflect broader social inequalities. Economically, good sleep is becoming a class privilege. Wealthier individuals can afford comfortable beds, quiet neighborhoods, climate control rooms, and flexibility to maintain regular schedules. They can access sleep specialists and treatments when problems arise. Poor and working-class individuals often face obstacles to good sleep. Shift work, multiple jobs with irregular schedules, noisy or unsafe neighborhoods, overcrowded housing, and inability to afford medical care for sleep disorders. Racial disparities in sleep are well documented, with Black Americans, for instance, getting on average less sleep and worse quality sleep than white Americans. These disparities reflect structural racism, discrimination, economic inequality, neighborhood segregation, differential access to health care, and the psychological stress of navigating racist societies all affect sleep. Certain occupations essential to society, healthcare workers, emergency responders, transportation workers, factory workers, often involve shift work or unpredictable schedules that make healthy sleep difficult. These workers bear the burden of sleep deprivation so that the rest of society can access round-the-clock services. This raises questions of justice. Is it fair that certain workers must sacrifice their sleep and health? Should there be hazard pay or other compensation? Should there be limits on how sleep-disruptive work schedules can be? Parenting, particularly mothering, involves significant sleep sacrifice. The expectation that mothers will handle most nighttime childcare often falls heavily on women, disrupting their sleep for years during childbearing and childrearing. This sleep inequality within families reflects broader gender inequalities in domestic labor. Sleep deprivation has been used as a tool of oppression and torture. Preventing someone from sleeping is an effective way to break down psychological resistance, impair cognition, and inflict suffering. Interrogation techniques involving sleep deprivation have been used by military and intelligence agencies despite being widely considered torture. Understanding sleep deprivation's psychological effects makes clear why it's such an effective tool of control. It attacks the very foundation of psychological functioning. Labor movements have historically fought for reasonable work hours partly as a sleep issue. The 8-hour workday movement was based on the principle of 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will. Protecting workers' sleep was recognized as fundamental to their well-being and dignity. Contemporary labor issues around scheduling, the fight against unpredictable schedules, on-call requirements, and mandatory overtime are also partly about protecting sleep. From a public health and justice perspective, ensuring that all people have the opportunity for adequate, healthy sleep should be a policy priority. This might include regulating work schedules, improving housing conditions, addressing noise pollution, ensuring access to sleep disorder treatment, and educating the public about sleep's importance. The fact that sleep is profoundly affected by social conditions means that improving sleep requires social change, not just individual behavior modification. Psychologically, recognizing the social determinants of sleep helps contextualize individual sleep problems. Someone struggling to sleep is not just making poor personal choices. They may be facing environmental, economic, or social barriers to healthy sleep. Addressing these barriers requires collective action and policy change alongside individual sleep hygiene. Reclaiming the night. As we conclude this exploration of sleep's psychological dimensions, we return to a fundamental question. What is sleep for? We've seen that sleep serves many functions. It consolidates memory, processes emotion, enhances creativity, restores energy, clears metabolic waste, and much more. But perhaps the more fundamental answer is simpler. Sleep is for being human. To be human is the cycle between consciousness and unconsciousness, between engagement with the external world and withdrawal into inner experience, between the bright clarity of wakefulness and the strange, symbolic logic of dreams. We are diurnal creatures who need the night, rational beings who require time and irrationality, conscious minds that depend on descent into unconsciousness. Sleep reminds us of our limits. We cannot be perpetually productive, perpetually alert, perpetually on. We are not machines that can run continuously if properly fueled and maintained. We are living beings who must rest, who must periodically let go of control, who must trust that the world will continue while we're unconscious. This can be humbling for cultures and individuals that valorize mastery, control, and ceaseless activity. Sleep also connects us to mystery. Despite all our scientific understanding, the subjective experience of consciousness slipping away, the strange world of dreams, and the sense of having been somewhere else during deep sleep remain fundamentally mysterious. We spend a third of our lives in a state we don't fully understand, experiencing phenomena we can barely remember. This mystery is not a gap in knowledge to be filled, but perhaps an essential aspect of the human condition. We are beings who regularly cross the threshold between knowing and unknowing. Throughout this exploration, a theme has emerged repeatedly. Sleep is not separate from waking life, but continuous with it. The quality of our sleep affects the quality of our waking hours, our mood, cognition, health, relationships, and creativity. Conversely, how we live while awake, our stress levels, habits, relationships, purposes, affects how we sleep. We cannot have psychological health in one domain while neglecting the other. This means that caring for sleep is caring for life itself. When we protect time for sleep, establish regular rhythms, create restful environments, and address sleep problems, we are not just pursuing better sleep. We are pursuing better lives. Conversely, when we sacrifice sleep, we sacrifice not just nighttime hours, but the quality of all our hours. Modern society's relationship with sleep has become distorted. We treat sleep as optional, as something to be minimized, as an inconvenience interrupting more important activities. The consequences of this collective delusion are now painfully apparent in rising rates of mental illness, cognitive impairment, chronic disease, and a pervasive sense of exhaustion that characterizes contemporary life. Reclaiming sleep requires both personal and collective action. Personally, it means making sleep a priority despite cultural messages suggesting we shouldn't. It means educating ourselves about sleep, developing good sleep practices, addressing sleep problems when they arise, and recognizing sleep's profound importance to our well-being. Collectively, it means creating conditions that support healthy sleep, work policies that respect sleep needs, school schedules that allow adolescents adequate rest, urban environments designed to minimize noise and light pollution, and healthcare systems that take sleep seriously. It means cultural change in how sleep is valued and discussed. Most fundamentally, reclaiming sleep may require a shift in consciousness, recognizing that productivity, achievement, and success are not achieved despite our human limitations, but must work within them. That rest does not oppose activity, but enables it. That unconsciousness is not wasted time, but essential time. That the night is not an interruption of life, but part of life's rhythm. For individuals struggling with sleep, there is hope. Sleep problems, while distressing, are usually treatable. Whether through improving sleep habits, addressing underlying medical or psychological conditions, or learning cognitive behavioral techniques, most people can improve their sleep significantly. Seeking help for persistent sleep problems is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of wisdom, recognizing that this foundation of health and well-being deserves attention and care. For those fortunate enough to sleep well, gratitude, and awareness are appropriate. Good sleep is a gift, one that reflects not just individual factors, but also privilege. The privilege of safe, quiet housing, of work that allows regular schedules, of freedom from the traumas and stresses that disrupt sleep for so many. This awareness might inspire not just personal gratitude, but commitment to creating conditions where more people can experience the gift of restorative sleep. As we close, imagine for a moment a world that truly honored sleep. School would start at times matching adolescent biology. Workplaces would respect employees' need for rest. Neighborhoods would be designed to minimize sleep-disrupting noise and light. Healthcare would routinely screen for and treat sleep disorders. Parents would be supported in their sleep-deprived early parenting years. Cultural narratives would celebrate rest and renewal rather than ceaseless hustle. Sleep would be recognized as a human right, a foundation of health, and a source of wisdom. We are far from that world, but movements in that direction are possible. Every individual who decides to prioritize sleep, every school that delays start times, every workplace that implements sleep-supportive policies, every healthcare provider who takes sleep complaints seriously. These are steps toward a culture that honors the nocturnal dimensions of human existence. Tonight, when you lie down to sleep, perhaps you'll do so with new appreciation for the psychological journey you're about to undertake. As you descend through the stages of sleep, your brain will engage in essential work, consolidating memories of the day, processing emotions you experienced, problem-solving challenges you face, and perhaps gifting you with dreams whose meanings are immediately clear or forever mysterious. You will spend hours in a state fundamentally different from waking consciousness, a state we're only beginning to understand. And when you wake, you'll return not to where you left, but to somewhere subtly different, carrying forward memories, insights, and restoration from the night. Sleep is not an absence, but a presence. Not emptiness, but fullness. Not nothing, but something profound, essential, and irreplaceable. In honoring sleep, we honor ourselves as complete human beings, creatures who need both day and night, consciousness and unconsciousness, activity and rest. May you sleep well, dream deeply, and wake refreshed. The nocturnal mind has wisdom to offer, if only we're willing to receive it.